just crossing the three of us will.
There are 10, I think, so we can probably.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah. So
Yeah, we are a full house. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I will just start with a warm welcome to every one of you. This is Nature Writing for Children certificate course from Azim Premji University. It gives us great pleasure to to kickstart the first batch of this course. It's a thing that we have been designing for past couple of months and working in the background to put this all together. And we are very lucky to have a very great response to this course. To just kickstart the whole proceeding, I would like to invite first Harini, who is a noted ecologist, author. She's a director of the Azim Premji, research center at the Azim Premji University, and most importantly, she has been a mentor and guide for this whole program itself. The genesis of this started with an idea that she seeded back, talking about how we can make things about nature more commonplace in terms of putting together a webinar, nature in our series, and those things. So, without much ado, Harini, there's little introduction I can do to you. So please, share your views and thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
So, hello everyone, it's really nice to see you. And there's a word in Kannada, I don't know how many of you have a similar word in your own language. I'm sure everyone does. It's called boni. And when you go to the market and you start, any new enterprise, the boni is the first people who come in, and they're the good luck people. So you're the first iteration of our course. We hope you're all good luck charms, and we plan to do this many times a year. And you are the seeds that we're looking forward to sort of increasing the genre. So why nature writing for children? I think Shashwat and I, when he moved to the university I think now more over 2 years back, in the heart of the dark days of the pandemic, we're thinking about how the world is transforming in front of us. There's climate change, there's biodiversity, there's environmental collapse, and we all know the gloom and the darkness that is facing us, right, on multiple fronts. And it was very apparent at that time. At that time, darkness can swallow you, I think, if you don't do anything positive to change it. And a few things started coalescing in our minds. First is the mission and vision of Azim Premji University itself, which some of you know about, but let me take a minute to explain this in greater detail. It's a very unusual private university in the Indian context because it's a private university with a philanthropic mission. It's completely funded by our own philanthropic corpus, and with the idea of contributing to 4 main goals of a just, equitable, sustainable, and humane society. Right? And everything we do is geared towards this direction. And therefore, the university, as we see it, is a place which is a part of society, embedded in society, and must speak to society. The original idea of what was a university, which somehow in the professionalization of Indian education has gone so much in the direction of engineering and medicine and MBA courses. I mean, not that we don't need them, but we don't need only these, right? So we're trying to restore that broader idea of education as contributing to society. So that's one part of it. And as part of that, the Azim Premji Foundation and the university, which is a part of the foundation, is extremely interested in the idea of climate change and sustainability. What can we do as a collective to engage with people and engage with groups to kickstart discussions around climate change and sustainability? Because really our conversations in India are very, very low compared to where they need to be, compared to the challenges that we see around us. Now, the second aspect is, in an atmosphere of gloom and doom, we see as a university which is higher education focused, even there, the young people that we see, it's an extraordinarily demotivating or almost paralyzing, anxiety-inducing thing to talk about climate change and environment and sustainability issues. And that is not where we want to go. Something that paralyzes you with anxiety is not the way forward. We all believe that we have to act. There is hope, and the hope comes from collective action, groups of people coming together. And one of the ways to engage with this is through books and humanities and imaginations of different possible futures, whether non-fiction or fiction, but more books on the environment. If you look at, the Green Lit Fest, which Megha has been a very strong part of, you can see that it's the first time India has had a literature festival that is focused exclusively on nature, and the amount of interest I think the Green Lit Fest got is really fantastic. Again, if you look at other things that we have seen, like Publishing Next has this award series, and last year, 3 of the 5 books they shortlisted on non-fiction were all from nature, or 4, I think. And it's just the interest is picking up hugely. Editors and publishers are very aware of this. I've been hearing from a lot of publishers that while, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of India was almost solely focused on fiction. Now there's a lot of interest in non-fiction, especially on the environment, books on the environment. Sell in the sense, not in terms of money, but in terms of increasing consciousness. That's where we're going. The third thing is, what do we do with the very young? India, of course, our demographic is bottom heavy. We have many more children than we have adults. And given the fact that we're also a fast urbanizing country, it's increasingly apparent that the children and the future adults of tomorrow will grow up in cities where their exposure to nature will be very limited. It's not the kind of exposure, even cities of 20, 30 years ago, I'm a city kid, we had many more chances of exposure to nature. And definitely the kinds of rural experiences of living in the forest or living with nature, that in fact some of your instructors will talk about, or some of the people you talked about, like Dai Whitaker might talk about it. Those kinds of experiences of growing up with nature is not things that children of today will get to see. They have the access to YouTube videos of nature, National Geographic, social media accounts, Instagram accounts, but not the real thing. Okay? And Richard Liu did talk in his very fundamental book about nature deficit disorder, the problem that children grow up without an access to nature, without a connect to nature, and that rewires their brain at a very early age. Because the processes of nature are slow, are imaginative, are full of wonder, are making a different kind of connection. And when you're wired to social media and city living, you're wired to expect these impulses of quick gratification. Something happens all the time. Right? And so nature is very important for mental health, physical health, calming you down. I think it's much more than environmental consciousness. It's just a way of being, right, in harmony with the world. But it's also a way of environmental consciousness. If we don't get the children who will be the future leaders of the world 20 years later, if we don't get them interested in nature, if you only let them think that life is about money and instant gratification and moving ahead and progress and all the words that they hear around them, then what hope do we have for the future? So with that in mind, Shashwat and I were talking about all of these issues 2 years back, coming back to the pandemic, and we said, let's start something. There is a nascent genre of nature writing for children. It's not nascent. Well, there have been some excellent people writing from Salim Ali and even before Salim Ali. So there has been that steady set, but let's say it's widened substantially in the last 5, 6 years, maybe even 10 years. A lot of new publishers have come in. There's a lot of ferment in the landscape. It's a time of great creativity. So we said, why don't we start a webinar series called Nature Writing for Children? We had a lot of debate back and forth, if you remember, Shashwat. We were thinking of, do we do nature writing or nature writing for children? And then we said, okay, there's a lot of groups talking about nature writing full stop, but almost no one talking about nature writing for children. And that's the age group we really want to target. Now, what is children, you might ask? Normally, as publishers define it as a certain age, it's school-going children. We are also encouraging you to think very broadly. For us, children are also our undergraduate and master's students. It really depends on, so all kinds of young people everywhere. How can we engage with them? This course, though, will be directed more towards the younger children. That's the focus of the course itself. And so we started this webinar series. We're now 22 episodes in. Every month, and you should look this up on our Azim Premji University YouTube channel. Every month, we have a conversation between two people. One is an interviewer. It could be one of us. It could be someone else from the publishing industry. I think Megha did one of our very first interviews. She's also been an interviewee for us. So there are a number of episodes we've had with publishers, with illustrators, with editors, with writers, and with people broadly interested in stimulating the entire publication landscape. A wide variety of authors and of topics that we've covered. They've been very fascinating. I really encourage you to go and look at these. And then very early on, we started thinking, what do we do when we get a critical mass? At some point, we need to hold courses about this. So you are our first batch. The result of all of this, we're very fortunate that Megha then joined us and came on board. We're also fortunate to have people like Smith, hi Smith, and a number of other people that you will talk to who've been wonderful part of this. We decided also very early on that Shashwat and I we're anchoring the course. But really, it's Megha, Smith, and people who are more familiar with the publication landscape who are going to be teaching the course and interacting with you, because that's what you need to learn. As people engaging with it, I myself, looking at my own journey into writing for children, I think I came up with a lot of ideas. And then I realized that you really need to learn from people in the field. As she was talking about, how to pitch to children, how not to talk down to them, how to have a child protagonist that a child can identify with, and a range of child protagonists who you can identify with, how to stimulate imagination, how trends in the publication landscape have changed over time, what the idea of own voices means, what the idea of diversity means today. There are many issues that they are far better placed to do this. And so that's the idea. We are facilitating this course, which will be led by a number of other people, right? And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. As Shashwat said, we were very pleased by the, as always happens with first iterations, we wanted to launch this a few weeks in advance, but we launched it really very short time before. And you also we're very pleased that you were managed to send us write-ups at such short notice. It's been a great group. We got 64 excellent applications, and we really had to struggle hard to select a smaller set. And we can't do too many, as you can see. If we do something like 30, 40, 50, we're going to lose that individual touch. So we selected 16 based on the applications, the write-ups that you sent. And it's interesting. Some of these things, we've got applications from different parts of India, Bangalore, Patna, Ranchi, Delhi, Jorhat, but we also got applications from UAE and from the US. We've got applications from all over. So that's been very interesting. Large number of submissions are fiction. We got about 60% fiction, about 15% non-fiction. And very interestingly, about 20% of you have submitted picture books, which is also very nice. You'll see that every entry has notes and suggestions. So we're very grateful to our instructors, who spent a huge amount of time. Smith and Timira and Megha have really looked at each of these entries and I think put in very detailed feedback for you. So you will learn from Smith, Zaveri and Timira Gupta a lot about what works in the genre, what does not work, what approaches to take. And Megha will be your facilitator through the entire course. We're very pleased. You'll also have authors like Ranjit Lal and Zai Whitaker, who of course, really, rock stars in the field and can actually share their perspectives along with you. We're also very happy that we can give you a chance to make an open pitch directly to editors and publishers. But we want to emphasize one thing, that we are just facilitators here. We're not obviously guaranteeing that you will get a book. What we hope to do is open your eyes and to a journey that opens certain networks to you, and the rest we leave forward to you. So that is just something we wanted to make clear from our end. It's not a course where you come in with an idea and we guarantee that we can give you a public. I don't think anyone can do that. It's really up to that match that you have to work out for yourself. And maybe it happens in this course, and maybe it happens some other time with another set of participants, right? But we will create some kind of an alumni network. We're doing this course once. We're going to run it multiple iterations. And at some point have meetups, either in our campus in Bangalore, or we're going to set up new campuses in Bhopal and in Ranchi. So we're happy to do meetups in different parts of the country. So through those networks, again, we hope that we can keep you connected to more and more writers, illustrators, editors, publishers. In fact, we've been very happy that a couple of publishers have also reached out to us saying, hey, we saw this, can we be part of the course? And so we'll pull them into future iterations. So yeah, that's essentially the kind of broad scope that I wanted to give you for the course. And I'm happy to take any questions. I think we have about, Shashwat, 15 minutes for our quick Q&A.
Yeah, if there are any questions, yeah.
Questions, thoughts, ideas for us to take up, anything.
Hi, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would really like to learn is how to do research when we are writing something nature related. What are the sources that are reliable and how we can use those sources to work on our writing better?
Sure. We'll definitely keep that in mind. And that is something that a lot of people come back to us and ask about. So we also hope that maybe through this kind of an alumni connect, you might be able to reach out to other people who are experts in these areas and you can directly connect to them. That is also one thing I wanted to talk about. Even for us, a lot of what we see in terms of the books we write, and some of them are published through the university itself, we reach out to experts because we all can't have expertise in everything, obviously. So So one of the things is just that the nature writing, the naturalist and ecologist community in India is extraordinarily supportive and usually very approachable. But we will definitely cover this.
Just one request. Whoever is asking a question, can you just also just say who that question is coming from? Because for some reason, I couldn't spot who asked that last question.
It was me, Sefi George.
Okay, Sefi, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I think she also has her hands up. So
Hi, I just wanted to from the course, like one of my concern is that how to move ahead when you're stuck in a narrative. So I'm looking for understanding not just structure of writing in terms of plotting and all, but also if something is not working in terms of narrative or in what you went out like a year back, you had these goals in your writing, but now you have done research and you have all of these new information from the publishing world, from the everyday life. So what happens, how do you move ahead when you're stuck? So that is something that I would like to know more.
Megha?
yeah. So Shreyasi, actually, I was, in fact, Shashwat did tell me that, you have this query. So we do have a critical review of the writings tomorrow, because Smith and I have been through, all the write-ups in fair detail, and we have our notes, some of which were sent to you. So I think tomorrow when we discuss, we'll take care of this particular concern that you have about what you have written. Yeah.
I've made a note of the questions as well, like Safi's question as well as Shreyasi's question. I'll try to see if we can touch upon just something just very broadly in our conversation, in the second conversation where we're talking about writing and publishing in particular. We'll try to see if we can sort of just like broad strokes, talk about a few things that you could do. And then we can do pointed feedback tomorrow when Megha and I are chatting with you. Yeah. So I'm just making note of the questions anyway.
So that's Smith. Yeah. In case anybody...
Sorry, hi. That's Smith.
Okay.
Books when she's not cooking and other good stuff.
Yeah. And she lives in a yellow house that smells of all the good things on the planet, like sugar, spice, everything nice.
I mean, Tamira's also in a yellow house, so clearly that's something, and is a fantastic cook. So it's clearly like the universe that you've picked from. Books, food, yellow.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Harini, or shall we?
Just wanted to flag a couple of the comments in the text box. So Venkat Raghavan says he loves the proposal for alumni and community creation. That's really nice. And I think some of these ideas of how to get stuck, how to get unstuck, Stacey, maybe can also be discussed in these groups. So let's think a bit about whether we want to set up something in Slack or we want to do something on Facebook. What's easiest for people to access, and what can be expandable going forward that, where people can chat. And I also like Minaz's point. It's true, it is very providential that we are starting this workshop on the day of the autumnal equinox. So yes, it's a good day.
Yeah, like Shashwat and I were going Ganpati Pappa Moria in the morning.
Ramya, you had your hands up.
Yeah, no, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to let Harini know that I immensely enjoyed your Trees and Canopies book. In fact, that's one of the books I read when I was trying to research for my own project. So I really, really liked it. Just wanted to tell you directly.
That's great. Thanks. And we hope you all, so we're all, Seema and I are working on the next water book, which is also a popular book, which we hope children will also enjoy on water in cities, again, from multiple perspectives. So
very nice.
So Harini, forgive me, I won't be able to help myself make a plug. We're creating a video series around the book Cities and Canopies called as Know Your Trees, which will be there on our...
Yes.
What is that, Shashwat? What are you doing with Trees and Canopies?
We are creating a whole series where featuring Harini and Seema called as Know Your Trees. It will be one, like her book was one tree, we'll take up one tree and we'll create a nice for our university channel. Yeah.
That should be interesting.
Shreyasi.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask who are the two writers who are coming up tomorrow so that we have time to make frame questions, because that was mentioned.
Yeah, so sorry, Harini, do you mind if you just, I think Harini did mention Zai and Ranjit Lal Zai Whitaker, Ranjit Lal have been invited for the session tomorrow. I was going to tell you at the end of the session, but Harini said the cat out the bag. But nevertheless, yes, you will have ample time. We are not intending to take up your whole day with this. So you will have ample time to go and look them up and think of questions for them. And yeah, we'll begin at 10 as usual with them tomorrow.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, you can dive in because I think there's lots to cover. So
yeah, so yes, thank you so much, Harini. So Megha, I'll get you on board. Megha is a little introduction. She's been unearthed her book. She, as Harini said, she was featured on our one of our initial talks that we had on Nature Writing for Children series. And she has just written a history book, After Midnight, which is also just released couple of, a week or so back, 2 weeks back, possibly. So she has been, she calls herself a taskmaster, and yeah, it's great fun also, but also difficult at times to work along with her because she's always, she has all the details, nitpicking on stuff, but that's great. So when we were going through this whole thing, we were like, can we do this? How do we do this? We just realized this is one of us, there's nothing like this being offered. So without much ado, let me just, Megha, you take over. She will also put the guidelines about what to expect, what not to expect, how will we go together. So Megha, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Harini. I know how crazy your schedules always are, but great that you actually conceived of such a series, and great that by some sort of strange workings of the universe, I happen to be the person to join you and Shashwat on this journey. And then we had Timira and Smith come along. So, there is this Hindi saying which says, actually now I'm forgetting, which says something, banta gaya, log judte gaye. Basically Sama, I think it is Sama banta gaya and log judte gaye.
Karwa chalta gaya.
Karwa, correct. Karwa banta gaya and log judte gaye. But I really have that feeling.
I think karma is a great word for this. Yeah, and I hope it's nice to have. I think that's exactly, all of us are part of this karma.
Yes, really, that's the sort of overpowering feeling I had as I looked at the lineup that we have for the next, the 3 days of this course. But hello everyone, great to have you all again with us. It's really wonderful to begin our community building initiatives with this. I think without much ado, I'm going to get into our first session for today. I've been working in publishing for the last 14 years, and something which I've seen in common with all of my, all the writers who I've admired and respected and who've done well in this field, that they're all also very good readers. They have a sense of the audience. And I think before you become a good writer, you also need to become a very discerning reader, have a sense of literature. So it's great that the first session we have today is actually going to help every writer, every participant with us today understand what it means to write for a particular audience. And I think this is even more important when we talk of children's literature, because as Venkat was saying earlier, there is an essential tension in children's literature, which is that we are writing for young people as adults. So how does one ensure that, the power equation the uneven sort of power equation between children and adults doesn't get in the way of the writing? So for that, it's even more important for us to have a very unbiased understanding of this audience that we're writing for. And I'm so glad that our first instructor for the day, Timira Gupta, is the kind of person who is going to take us through reading the audience. Timira has a background in arts-based therapy. In fact, at the start of her career, she used it, to work with children from various backgrounds, used arts-based processes like theater, storytelling, circus arts, to work with children from various backgrounds. Also, Timira has been the executive director at the Mumbai-based Akshara High School for the last 8 years. And during that time, she played a pivotal role in designing a curriculum where books, including several books on the environment, play an important role in the everyday, sort of discussions. And actually, she's just the person to take us through the kind of, audience one can expect for these books, because she's been working with children, actively curating books at the school, also understanding how children respond to this book or respond to these books. And most of all, she's also a children's writer. So she has, in fact, one of her most widely acclaimed books is Pishy and Me by Pratham Books. And it's a book which you all can check out at the end of the session. But she, as a writer, as a school administrator, firmly believes in the power of children's literature to foster change and social change, environmental consciousness, awareness in children. So without much ado, I'm going to welcome Timira. Just 2 quick house rules. One is that please don't worry about jotting down notes and jotting down, book names. I'm going to collate all the information from the sessions today, and it's going to be emailed to you as a consolidated document next week. And the other thing is, yes, of course, I think we've already sort of seen a role, sort of play out of that. If you all have questions, just press the hand icon. And we want to keep these sessions interactive. We don't want to keep them as lectures, what Venkat was saying earlier, a one-way sort of lecturing. It's going to be open to the audience. Everybody will be able to share their inputs. In fact, that's what we are hoping to do. So I think I have said my piece, and I shall now have Timira come on board to take us through reading the audience.
I just wanted to add my own hellos to, hi Timira, it's great to have you on board, and really happy that you could both do this with Timira.
Thank you, Harini. I've just heard so much about you, and I'm happy to see you here. I'm so happy to be part of this workshop. Thank you, Megha. Thank you, Shashwat, for bringing me on board. And thank you for giving me 2 more minutes, Megha. That gives me a little more time with all our participants. So everyone, good morning. I'm really, really excited to be here. I have like a huge stack of books next to me, and I hope that I can read many to you and talk about many more. But as Megha said, that I'm going to be talking more about the reader, because that's the world I come from. My world is usually surrounded by younger people and children who end at my waist. And it's a really nice world to be in, where you walk around on your knees and sit on the floor so that you're at their same level and height. Which is also a very important part in understanding your audience. So before I even begin talking and taking you through lots of books, I would really encourage that all of you invest time in hanging out with younger people and understand their world, understand their perspective, understand how they view the world, between knees of adults, because that's what they see. So it's really important. I mean, I'm sure some of you have your own children, but that's a little bit of subjective view of the world. So it's really important to kind of be with, friends, kids, random children in the park, observe, talk to them, because you guys are writing for children. So it's really important that you inhabit their world as well. So yeah, okay, so let me begin. And of course, like Smith and like Megha and all the other wonderful people who inhabit the world of children's books, we are absolute addicts of picture books. So I'm going to begin my session with this wonderful, wonderful book, which is which is called The Giving Tree. And some of you, I'm sure, know about this book, which is quite a famous book by Shel Silverstein. And I thought it was a great way to start this session. So I'm going to take you through this book, and then of course we're going to talk, and then we are going to have questions from you, and I'm going to take you through it. So Megha, is this good? Can everyone see the illustrations clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, perfect. Okay, so it's called The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. And It's a picture book with very few words, so I'm going to take you through it. Once there was a tree. Sorry, let me just get this. And she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk. You can see the little boy climbing up the trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples. And they would play hide and go seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much. But time went by. And the boy grew older. I love this illustration. And the tree was often alone. Then one day the boy came to the tree and the tree said, "Come boy, come and climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and eat apples and play in my shade and be happy." "I am too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples." "Here, take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away, and the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy. And she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I'm too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house. But you may cut off my branches and build a house. Then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time. And when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered, "come and play." "I'm too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And what do you think the tree was? Happy. And the tree was happy, but not really. After a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone." "My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I'm too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You can't climb." "I'm too tired to climb," said the boy. "I'm sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I'm just an old stump. I'm sorry. I don't need very much now, said the boy. Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I'm very tired. Well, said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could. Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down and rest. And the boy did. How do you think the book's going to end? What's going to be the last line?
And
yes,
the tree was
I see many of you mouthing it. And the tree was happy. The end. So, it's a book that always gets me all teary-eyed. It's horrible, horrible books that make you cry every time you read it. So this is the question that I'm going to ask. Who is this book written for? It's a picture book. It's got very few words, very simple words. But you think it's only for children? Of course not, right? So this big question, who is your reader? Oh, what age group? Oh, where do they come from? Of course, these are important questions. And of course, we need to answer them as writers because we need some sort of an idea of who we're writing about. But a book like this really tells us that books, especially picture books, right, kind of go beyond age, go beyond demographic, go beyond everything, especially the power of images, right? I've done these books, specifically this book with city urban kids from international schools. I've done it with kids living in slums. I've done it in Gram Vidyalayas, like in village schools, and it has worked across. Right? I've worked with adults, of course. I work a lot with teacher training, and I've worked with like adults. It's a book that just surpasses everything. All right. So having said that, I mean, we are going to talk about our reader and different, demographics and reading levels. But this is the base that you need to understand, that you can't get so, bogged down and blinkered about who you're writing for that you forget the essence of a book, which is beyond everything else. Yeah. So let's look at two things that we need to know about our reader. Okay, one is their reading level. Okay, what is approximately the reading level, because that will help you to structure your sentences, how long your sentences are, and the kind of vocabulary you use in whichever language that you're writing. Yeah, because otherwise a lot of the books, they have short sentences which are easy for children to read, but some words are so, levels are higher that children are unable to understand the essence of the book or the sentences. And of course, a basic demographic. There are two types of demographic that one you need to realize. One is who's your reader, who's going to be reading it. Depends again on the publisher, where they're going to take your books. There are many publishing houses that work in semi-urban, semi-rural setups. So their languages are different, but also their settings are different. And there are many publishers that work only in the cities and send their books only. So, you need to know who's your reader. But you also, when you're writing, you should kind of decide who your character is and what the demographic of the character is, right? So sometimes the character of the demographic, the reader will match the demographic of the character in the book, but sometimes you also want to, introduce or maybe tell a city kid how life is in the rural area, right? So your character will be of a semi-urban or semi-rural or even a rural setup, but it is targeted for a child living in the city who pretty much has no idea of what's happening outside of their city. And I'm going to give you examples of all these through books, right? So just these two ideas for you all to make an understanding, the reading levels. Now, what are reading levels? You all are aware of picture books, which are like these very simple, few sentences a page, There's a beautiful book called Uncle Nehru, Please Send an Elephant. So you'll just see like there are, basic lines. So of course, when you work with a publisher, they will give you these broad outlines. I'm not going to spend too much time wasting on like how many words per page, which level, etc., etc. Those guidelines are always given to you by the publisher. So don't worry too much about it. However, of course, there are picture books, and picture books have a lot of width in terms of who you're targeting. But then you have something called early chapter books, which are for children who are just about reading. And these are children who are independent readers. They're reading without an adult supervising them or helping them. So those books can be very simple, like the idea has to be kind of simple, not very complex, not too many plots in the story. So you see like Duckbill has these whole books. I arranged everything, but while we were all talking, I kept moving things around and I can't find my whole book stack. Anyway, right here. Okay, so like these are, very short stories, like Dugville has these hook books, The Daddy and the Well, Boy Bear. These are all really short stories, but it's in a full book format, so that you feel like, oh, I have finished reading a book. So you see, it's like a picture book, but they've kind of made it look like like, oh, I'm reading a whole book now. I'm a 7-year-old or I'm a 6-year-old, So those formats are good. There are these very beautiful books, mini reads by I think Karadi, if I'm not mistaken. These are again, early chapter books, very simple ideas, not very complicated, for young readers who are, who are progressing from picture books to chapter books. Then of course there are chapter books, and then there are indulgent novels in which you can become you can take your advocacy through them. And there are some really crazy writers like Bijal, and also Megha, who write like for children who will tomorrow become our climate warriors tomorrow, right? So it's those kind of books. So there are these two books which are Indian books called A Cloud Called Bhura and Savi, The Memory Keeper. These are both by Bijal, wonderful books. Again, very high on advocacy, very high on indulging in the idea of climate change and doing something about it. So this one's a very direct book for geek children who want to go and do lots of wonderful things. And of course, this is high on emotions, dealing with difficult ideas of death and sorrow and loss and grief, but with a very, very interesting line of climate and how that's affecting a lot of life around us, right? So these are different levels. Of course, these are for proficient readers, and they're for readers, so they will read anything, right? You know how readers are, and it's a great way that if you have that audience to kind of bring in the environment and the climate for them. Yeah. Of course, you have fiction and non-fiction, and I'm going to come to that at the end of this session as to how we can deal with fiction. Fiction's delicious, as Harini was saying. I think a lot of you have written fiction. Non-fiction is difficult, but I mean, I'm a big fan of Megha's non-fiction books. So there are great examples of how you can make your children absolutely in love with non-fiction. And in fact, like my school, the one I run in Bombay, we have books like Unearthed, which Megha has written as part of curriculum. Like all children have a copy, so they buy a textbook and then they also buy Unearthed, which is part of their geography and EVS curriculum, right? So this is a great way to kind of get them to read it. And of course, just yesterday I was in school and they were all doing chitter about this midnight book that Megha is doing, and they were very upset that Megha is traveling and cannot come for our literature week. So there is, you can really build a lot of buzz for a non-fiction. It's not difficult, so don't be afraid of writing non-fiction. It's really how you take it to the children and how interactive you make these books so that they are delicious and they want to eat it, So we will talk a little bit about fiction and non-fiction. Any questions about reading levels? Because I really don't want to spend too much time on this because I have something more delicious waiting for you. But I want to just ask if anybody has any basic questions or any, concerns or any comments about reading levels or anything that you would like to ask me, and then we'll move ahead.
one second. I think there is also, Timira, if I'm not wrong, there are online resources where one can understand reading levels. So I'll include that in the document that I sent you all as a reference.
Absolutely. Raghavendra says, good to move ahead. Thank you, Raghavendra. Yeah, okay, super. All right, so what I'm really excited about in today's session is what I'm going to talk about is the perspectives. Okay, so we're going to look at different perspectives that one can choose while writing, and this is something that I think I'm in love with, this idea of perspectives, the world of perspectives. And my first book with Pratham Books was also about a child and how they perceive the world. So the entire book was illustrated from a very point of view of a child who's like just 2.5 feet high, right? So like, how do they look at the world? So very, very visually, how do they look, but also conceptually, how does, how do we perceive the world? But also as writers, what is the perspective that you choose when you're writing? Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about now and spend a lot of time on. And I would really, really like you to also maybe make notes and write down questions if you're not really sure about something. And after the end of this short section, we can have an interactive like Q&A. Okay, so so the giving tree that we began the session with, what do you think the perspective is about? You can just unmute and speak so that it's not a one-way communication. Otherwise, Shashwat will be very upset with me. Okay, so just don't raise your hand and I'll just unmute and tell me, like, what do you think the perspective was of the giving tree? Yes, Ramya.
The perspective was from a tree's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the tree trying to kind of figure out how the boy is feeling and giving things to the boy.
Right.
And you don't see anything else there. It's just where the tree is located. But you sense what's going on the other side.
Yeah.
Without actually looking at any pictures of it. But the perspective is all about, I think, from the tree's perspective. And if you look at it, if you're asking from a child's perspective, I think it's like you said initially, it's something that I think people all age groups can relate to.
Right, right. Thank you, Ramya. So of course, yes, you also have the perspective of the child and the boy who becomes a man, but the story is really given from the point of view of the tree, right? So like how the tree was alone and how the tree was waiting and how the tree was really happy when the boy visited back, etc., etc. So it was clearly an inanimate. I mean, it's a living thing, so it's animate, but it's like an inanimate object that you can give life to, and you can really bring that perspective, right? That it brought joy when the boy visited, and it was also, what is the tree? It's like a big statement on nature, right? It only gives, it keeps giving, it gives until its last breath. Even the stump was giving, So it's the nature of nature. And it's such a beautiful book where you don't have to really say that, but you're saying it through this story. You understand what I'm saying, right? We know that like when you eat one orange, it has like 12 seeds in it, and each seed has the power to make one tree, which will give thousands of fruit, and each fruit will have seeds in it, which like it's an insane, like if you sit and do maths, you'll go mental, right? So it's that idea that you've captured, you haven't been overwhelmed with it, but you've been able to capture it in such a sweet story of a relationship between man and nature, right? And it's not large, it's very specific, it's very small, and so beautiful. Like a 3-year-old will connect to it, and a 90-year-old will connect to it at the same level. So it also brings a lot of equality in your audience. Like that you're writing with absolute respect for a 3-year-old because they'll get it. It's so simple, this idea. You don't have to explain anything to them at the end. Oh, you don't have to shut the book and say, "Acha, batao beta, moral of the story kya hai?" You don't have to, because it's like emotions, it's feelings. You get it. You get the relationship that we share, right? And you get the selfishness of man. Like it's so evident that they're so blinded by their life and what they want, and how we live our lives, that timeline is is not even clear to the man that what the man has been or the boy has been doing, right, with the tree. So that's that aside, okay. And also everybody, yes, Deborah, yes, exactly.
Sorry,
Just gonna say that anybody wants to say anything, just unmute and speak, okay? I'm very good at this. I know exactly when somebody unmutes. Yes, Deborah.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I found also very interesting in the book was that nowhere it uses I mean, even and still, you know, the readers immediately identify with the tree. And I think there is that kind of power within the illustrations, and also even if it's like actually an observer, but your immediate kind of connection is with the tree's perspective. And I wonder whether, you know, there's that inherent thing to understand. I mean, and there is this distancing from the person as well, because, you know, you feel like, oh, I mean, why is that person being so selfish? I mean, doesn't he realize what the tree is going through? And there is no judgment, but yet people are making judgments, right, about like what is happening. So that, I think, is a very interesting way of putting forth such powerful arguments without at any point saying that the tree, I felt bad about this. And, you know, the term that is that you, I mean, the phrase is like the tree was happy, the tree was happy, the tree is still happy, and maybe a little sad, but nowhere. Yeah, so that part of it is like very, very beautiful. So,
and also it's not even judging the boy. Like I feel like even the boy is not judged at any point from the book. It's us who judge the boy.
Exactly.
You know, the book is not lending anything that judges the boy. The boy is also requesting the tree that, would you have something for me? Like right now in my life, I need money. Right now I need a house. Right now I need a boat. Like, you know, is there something that you can do to help me? Right? Like, it's very humble of the boy also to go back to his friend, you know, in that sense. So yeah, thank you for that comment, Deborah. So yes,
no, I just wanted to say that, you know, it's very interesting that you chose this book, Timira, because there's such a school of debate that exists about this book, in terms of there are many scholars who think that it's a very, very selfish way of, you know, portraying of, you know, this, it sort of feeds into people's exploitation of nature. And maybe these are not the kind of books we should be giving. There's even like one extreme of that school that says these are not the sort of books we should be writing for children. So it's very interesting, because I feel like that, I mean, I'd love to hear your inputs on that. But there are many such books where people have come back all guns blazing and said we should not have these kind of books for children, because, you know, they are clearly giving a worldview which is very, very skewed in terms of, you know. So have you ever had that sort of discussion when you take this book?
Well, see, I'm of the opinion that you cannot throw your worldview on children. They come from their own worlds and they have very strong opinions, and nothing can change that. And any book that allows conversation and equally on both sides is great. I'm like, I want more conversations like this. If it's a book which somebody says that, oh, you should not write books like this, I mean, you're crazy. Of course you should write, because it allows me to have even more conversation and deeper conversations with children about it, right? So like for me, bad books are also great books because they allow conversation, you know. And why not? Isn't that the idea of writing and books and literature?
So that's an interesting input for writers. Sometimes in self-censoring, we think, oh, this is not the kind of thing we should be telling children. We should, you know, everything should be nice about the world.
Yeah.
That's something.
But anyway, I mean, see, every book will have its own world that it comes with, and opinions and which side you want to take. But I think right now we're just going to like focus on, you know, different perspectives that we can bring, and then you guys will obviously play around with it when you're writing and you're on, you know, sitting in front of your paper, pens, or laptops or whatever, right? So this was, of course, a perspective of a tree and of the relationship between a tree and you know, a man. Then we have, of course, the perspective of animals. Okay, and one of my most favoritist books is this wonderful book called P.S. What's Up with the Climate. It's available free of Pratham Books online, storyweaver.org. Megha, if you could just put that in the chat box, please, for everybody to kind of know this portal. It has all its Pratham books free, so you can really go through a lot of these books. They have different filters, so you can actually look at climate books as well. So PS, what's up with the climate? Are letters that animals are writing to each other. So this is, I'm just going to not read the whole book, but I'm going to take you through it a little bit. So these are images which are beautifully illustrated. And it says, "Dear penguin, how's the weather there? Here it's moody every day. Even the seals are hiding. But it's lunchtime. How to find them? Warmly, polar opposite bear. PS, have you heard from the mosaic tail rat recently?" Yeah, so this is a polar bear writing to a penguin about how it can't find lunch. All right. Then it's the penguin replying, of course, to the polar bear. How rude, you have to reply, right? So, "Dear polar opposite bear, it's hot. It's very hot. It's very, very, very hot. I can't bear it. I just can't bear it. I just can't bear it at all. We're in a flap, 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 flap. The fish have swum far, 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 far away, off to look for them. Too warmly, penguin. PS, rats. Not in a while. Let me find out." So they're all looking for the mosaic-tailed rat, of course, which you think, right? And just like that, oh, look, there's a postcard from the mosaic-tailed rat. Let's see where he is. "Hello, here it's not hot at all. Would you like to come visit us? It's too cold to fly. You won't mind as you can't fly. Penguin, haha, you don't, right? Flying kisses, flying, not right now, squirrel." Okay, PS, so, oh, this is from the squirrel, sorry, not from the mosaic tail. And PS, sorry, not a squeak from the mosaic tail rat. Okay, so of course, everybody's trying to look for the mosaic tail rat. Everybody's telling them how the weather is at their end. Some can't find fish, some can't find food, some can't fly because it's too cold, and so on and so forth. It's a really cool book. You all must see it. There's this crazy hermit crab who's very crabby, and then there is the hungry and upset bear who's grizzly and not polar, because everybody calls these bears polar bears and they're not polar bears, and they're very upset about their identity crisis. And then there's, of course, the snow leopard, yes, who is again, so you get a hang of it. And then there's, of course, the kangaroos who are running from a forest fire, and just before, look how the letter is also half burnt before they send it off. And who are these people? They are the northern pin-tailed duck. But you see that through this book, which is so delicious and so interactive and so simple, like it's just like 3 lines of one, you were like, what is this pin-tailed duck? I don't even know what this animal is. And then you can like look it up if you're one of those kids. And at the end, they also have a little postcard. Okay, so it's a delicious book. And look, it's really, really beautiful. It's the idea. Okay, it's just the idea. It's a perspective of animals. Okay, and in a very simple picture book format. But there's also a novel and like a chapter book which is called One and Only Ivan, which is also the perspective of a gorilla who's been living all his life in a zoo in New York. And in New York only, no? Yeah, in Central Park. No, where is it? I forgot. I've read it so many years ago. Smith, help me. Yeah, anyway, doesn't matter. But
I can't remember. I'm looking at it because I also wanted to read from it.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's from a, basically like they have a shopping center in this in New York or somewhere, and then they have like a zoo in it, and this Ivan has been living in that place, and that he knows life like that, like that's his life. He does cool things for visitors who come and little children who come. He loves his life until, of course, he meets a little baby elephant who says, "Hey boss, तू पागल है क्या? इधर क्या रह रहा है? उधर कितना chill है मौसम. We have to get out of this place, right?" So it's about that. It's really about perspectives again. Beautiful book, will make you weep and weep for days when you read it. There's also a movie. Please don't watch it. I don't think it will be that great. I like all movies destroy books, but please read this book. It's really, really interesting. And it's from the perspective of these animals. And again, as you can see, it's a relationship between these two beautiful animals. One who's always lived in this zoo and cage, and one who is brought from nature into this space, seeing that, hello, what is this life? This is not the life that I signed up for, right? So how they kind of figure life out and, you know, show different worlds, etc. Very, very nice book. Of course, for readers. So this is the perspective of the animal. Of course, you can, I mean, just this idea that you can go into the animal and, show them that world is also great. Then, of course, let's go to humans and characters. Okay, so we have a book called No Nonsense Nandini, which is part of Pari and Karadi's initiative to write about real stories, and it's about a female farmer who grows flowers in a little village, I think in Karnataka, if I'm not, no, Tamil Nadu, sorry, in Tamil Nadu. And it's a character in the village and their life. Very, very interesting. It talks about everything from, climate change, because it's their life. So you're invested in the life of this lady, her children, how their life is dependent on crops, etc., etc. How the water is a problem, how there's mining going to happen in their village, and how that's going to affect them. How there are these big companies who come and sell seeds, which is a very interesting idea for even young people, because they're like, hey, you have to buy seeds. How did that happen? How did the world get there, right? So it's really interesting to understand, like farmers are in debt because they have to constantly buy seeds. Like, this is a very interesting concept woven into fiction, which is inspired from a very, very true story. This Nandini lady exists. She talks to children. She's very proficient, and amazing. Like, the Aparna who's written this is, of course, a journalist, and she really, really speaks very passionately about this story. And if you read it, you will understand, because there are also child characters, by the way. The son, this lady's son, is a very important character, but everything is from the perspective of people living in a village, which is so interesting for city kids, because they have no idea how life is there. And this is not a very high reading level. They are early chapter books. So while it's simple vocabulary, it's simple lines, it's a very thin book, it's not very thick, but the content is heavy. Like, it's really interesting, but the storyline is simple, right? There's a lot of thought, lot of things that you can talk about. I don't have the books. Smith, do you have Year of the Weeds with you? Can you just show the cover, please? My book is borrowed by some kid in my school. So the same idea, if you can see Smith's screen, is this beautiful book called Year of the Weeds by Siddharth Sarma. There, even Megha is flashing the book. We will send you all these books, a list of them, okay? Same thing, characters in a city, in a village, a little boy who loves farming, etc. And again, when big guys come to mine, what happens, how things change when the climate, when it's not raining, how dependent they are on water, etc., etc., etc. So these are things that build the story, but the very invested characters, very invested storyline, a story about friendship, a girl from the city coming in, living in the village because her father is a collector or some sort of government administrative job. So he comes back. So it's interesting, because it's that, again, like, for a city kid to read it, there is some element of, I don't know how life works in a village, and then you're meeting somebody from the village, so that whole perspective is kind of brought in. Again, Year of the Weeds is a book that we do in 9th grade and 10th grade as part of curriculum in our school. And the responses, and No Nonsense Nandini is part of curriculum in 8th grade. And we read these books on an regular basis in our library class, in our reading program. So every child has a book. And for children, one is like, for example, in No Nonsense Nandini, the idea of buying seeds to grow things was absolutely new. They did not know that this is something which makes farmers go deep into debt. That was one thing. They had no idea that the devices they use, all these things that they use, require metals and things that come from soil, from the land. They have to destroy forests for it. So these connections of life and how we use things on a daily basis, and how it affects people who live far away from you, who you have no idea about, and you're so interconnected and you're so responsible for destroying their life. right? In a very, very direct sense, it's that. And while not making children feel heavy about their existence on the planet, these are conversations that happen in the class when we are talking about these books. I know, like, we have a reader, a library educator who also runs like a reading club when they're not in school. So she brings back responses of children from her reading groups. And it's really interesting how these fiction, very, very fiction heavy books, these are all fiction books, bring this idea of how we living in the city are very connected to lives of people living in villages, but we have no idea about it, you know, and how people in villages as well have no idea how their lives are so connected with people in the city, because when they come for mining, like, a lot of people in the villages don't even know what they're doing, why they're digging up their forest, like they have no idea what they're looking for, right? And these are all ideas that are there in the story, they are there in the book, because there's always a perspective of somebody in the village who was like, what's going on, and another perspective of a city kid saying that, hey, I have the internet, let's find out what's going on, right? So it's really that kind of relationship that's beautifully put in Year of the Weeds, and brings about tons of conversation. Of course, books like PS What's Up with the Climate, for example, like when I do it with even 9th and 10th graders, so it's a very simple picture book. It's about perspective, and then, you know, we also write letters as animals to writing to other animals. We live in the city, okay, and we identify you know, problems of animals in the city. Like, have you seen how many dogs walk around limping in the city? Like, it's insane how many dogs have fractured limbs walking around in pavements. You know, cats who are just like stray cats. So there are cats, dogs, there are squirrels. We have tons and tons of squirrels in the city. So really trying to get the children to, you know, get into the heads and thoughts of animals. And it's a really interesting idea of empathy, but also a creative writing exercise that one can do with children. So the responses of these books are so wonderful when it comes from the children, because they immediately connect with these books, because they have a very clear perspective. There's no question of like, okay, what is this book about, who is it talking to? It's very clear, and the clarity in the book kind of allows that interaction with the child and opens up those spaces of conversation.
Have you had any interesting responses to these books, Timira? You know, because they're very so different.
Yeah.
Have you ever found that the book was written for a particular audience, but when you took it to the, you know, children, you had a very sort of different input from them? That might be very interesting to know.
Yeah, like for example, PS, I mean, I was very bold and I took it in grade 10. I thought they'll just be like, they'll not respond, but the responses were really, really interesting, because it's a perspective that they've not seen, and it's a voice that they've not heard, right? And also it's very smart, the humor in the book, the way it's written. And then they also for me, what was exciting was the idea of them writing about animals in the city didn't come from me as a facilitator. It came from the children. They're like, hey, can we also write a book like this? Or can we also write, you know, letters from animals to each other, like in the city, because that's the space we inhabit. So for me, that was very empowering for a child to like bring that proposition that, hey, in the next class, can we do this activity, right? So it was interesting that they chose a city. They're like, humko pata nahi in the village, in the forests what happened, but we are very sure of what happens. Like, we know crows scavenge for, they're always, they're like full, their tummies are always full because our city is full of garbage. Like, that's such an interesting perspective, right? So they want to then talk from the crow's perspective, or from the rats, like who are the animals in the city who are always fed. Like in Bombay, no one goes hungry, even the animals don't go hungry. But what are the, you know, so that idea was great. But of course, like No Nonsense Nandini and Year of the Weeds are super hits. Megha, I'm just coming to you, yeah. You know, they are like super hits only because it just opens up windows which otherwise you rely on non-fiction to do, which is boring, and it's a little bit of like a burden because you're going through like one project and you have to submit one geography project on this date. So then you have to read one book by this author called Megha Gupta, and now like, oh, I have to go through this book, or, you know, so it's that becomes exciting when you've already built curiosity. So then I want to read more about what Megha Gupta or Bijal have written in their non-fiction books, because I'm already very, very interested. I'm like, seeds, people are buying seeds. What is this? And then I go looking for more information on it, So it's that idea of the response of the children, which is at a very personal level, So it's how they approach information now, which is very interesting for me. Yes, Megha.
Yeah, hi. I think because you seem to work so much with children, and I am an illustrator primarily. I'm curious, what is the role of visuals in the whole? I know PS, yeah, what's up with the climate? I think the visuals carry the book a lot. It lifts up the whole story, the narrative itself.
Yeah.
But for example, you're mentioning a lot of non-fiction books. Megha has written one, the other Megha. So yeah. So how does what is the response, and what role does a good visual, how do the visuals play along in making the book more compelling? That's something
Okay, so I'm just going to answer that question right away and not keep it at the end for the end. But do you know this book? It's a story about Janaki Amal. Yeah, so it's Lavanya's book, which is illustrated completely and tells you the story of Janaki, which is a very, very interesting way of just telling her story. And it's such an inspiring story. So this is definitely one example, Megha, of how an illustrator and their work really helps in bringing about a story forth. But there's also, and I'm going to come to this book a little later as well, which is called Coral Woman. And again, this is a book which is a story about Uma Mani, who learned how to swim and dive after she was 45 years old, because she was just interested in understanding what the hell corals are and what happens. And the book is absolutely beautifully illustrated. I mean, because Uma Mani also was somebody who started painting corals, right? So it's just absolutely delicious. And of course, this is a great book of a combination of fiction and non-fiction, which is so wonderful. And now that we're on this topic, I would like to say how it's the story of Uma Mani, of course, okay? And it's telling you about how, she started and at what point did she start to learn how to swim and dive and, really go underwater and figure it out, because as a 45-year-old, you have more fears than anything else. But also, like, it's so beautifully designed, this book, Megha, that if you see the blue parts are the non-fiction bits. Okay, so you'll see what are corals as a little blurb, but they've not put it in one blurb. Like that, so this is the fiction bit, like not the fiction, but her story, like a biography. And then every time, of course, it gives you lots of breathing space with these gorgeous pictures. We are going back to her story, and every now and then you will see that they break into these blue like waves, one second. And in that wave, you'll see fiction like this,
right?
And they've used children's illustrations of scuba divers and corals, and you see, like, this is by some girl who's 9 years old, so it's very, very interesting, because it becomes the child's like, maybe Lubaina wanted to write a book on corals because she went snorkeling one day and said, hey, I want to write a book about like corals for children. But it's not about Lubaina's passion. She's really made it about a story which is inspiring, but also just the visuals are very like children will connect with it almost immediately, and it's a heavy book, a lot of text. Yes,
when you work with children and you place out these books, do they naturally get drawn towards books with visuals?
Yes. That's a given. Because especially children who are not readers, like who are not naturally readers, they get drawn first towards visuals, and then so these books which have a lot of fiction and non-fiction in it, very heavy words, but with visuals, are a great way to pull non-readers into that space and kind of open that world out, because then they're very, it's delicious what's written in there. It's not like they're not literate, they know how to read. It's just that they'll never pick up a one and only Ivan, because they'll be like, itna mota hai, like, so, and there are no pictures in it, so they'll just keep it aside. I'm talking about non-readers, right? But readers, of course, will pick up anything and eat everything that they can see. Yeah. So I hope I have kind of answered your question, Megha.
Questions from Shreyasi and then Nivedita.
Yes, Shreyasi.
Hi, Timera. Thanks for this. I had two questions. So first was about like this whole thing about perspective. So I wanted to know if, can you give me an example of, like, we have discussed so many books right now. So from the books that you have given us or from your own experience, can you give me an example of a place where the perspective falters? Now, what do I mean by a falter? In the sense that it went too much, like,
it didn't work. Yeah,
it didn't work, or how do you, so basically as a writer, I want to know that how do you know when to stop? So for example, in the tree, if the tree had been younger and then from there on I had taken the story till the time that it was cut stump, would that have worked? Or the fact that it started when it was already a good enough, like a young adult tree? So
I'll come to that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
I will.
So
I will give you some examples. Yeah.
Okay. And second was like from your experience of working with adolescents, I wanted to know what is that perspective which interests them the most, or the point of view which interests them the most. You've already answered like a little bit about the voice, that they're not like in PS, what's up with the climate. They were curious to know because they've not already heard about all of these species. But so is there like in your experiences, is there a particular perspective or point of view which always captures their reading experience? So that's
okay. So I'm going to answer your second question first, because your first question I'm coming at to in this session. I think there's no standard key. This is something which is very interesting for them. I feel like as authors, you'll also need to identify things that children do not know and would be excited to know about. Okay, so this could come from a deep passion. Like there is this beautiful book called The Line Tender. Again, it will make you weep and cry. Which is about sharks. Okay, it's about this little girl whose mother was a marine biologist, and it comes from a very deep passion for sharks and for study of sharks, and it's very specific. Okay, I don't know if Kate Allen cares about sharks or not, but maybe she's hugely passionate herself. But the point is that the whole book is about this crazy search for dealing with grief and loss, of course, because she loses her mom, who was a marine biologist, and how she takes on that research as a little young girl. And it works really well, even for like for adolescents, because it has emotions in it. It talks about death, loss. These are things that we don't talk about with children, right? Grief, how do you deal with grief? How do you deal with loss? So the book is about actually that. It's about death, loss, grief, but it has this layer of climate, of sharks, of what's happening because of environmental change to these sharks, etc., etc., etc. And how do people who closely work with sharks deal with it, and how you can also make money out of it. So those are like those that's life. But the book gets really drawn to adolescents because you're talking about something that otherwise nobody's talking to children about. Right? You don't tell like a 14-year-old how to deal with death or loss. And so if their friend comes saying that, hey, I lost my grandmother because she died 2 days ago, you don't know how to deal with that information. You don't know how to be there for your friend. And books like this really help you to understand how to be there for somebody. So honestly, Shreyasi, if you're looking at writing for adolescents, it's not something very specific in terms of information. Yes, Year of the Weeds really talks about climate in a very direct sense. It tells you very directly about the impact of things like mining, etc., on forests. But if you're writing for adolescents, you have to also be very, very aware that there has to be a very strong layer of relationship, emotions, which is what like kind of keeps the thread very connected with adolescents. Yeah. I will answer your first question later, Shreyasi. Nivedita, yes.
Yes. So what I wanted to just what you introduced us to is so beautiful. I loved it. I loved your narration. I loved the way you took us through books. I was just have an observation about illustration. There's this to use your own adjective, very delicious way of illustration and story going hand in hand. Sometimes it complements the story. Sometimes it tells a story of its own. Like if you take Tough Boris by Mem Fox, which is of course a foreign book and maybe expensive, but it has very little narration in it, very little writing in it, while the illustrations are telling a completely different story. If you have the narration telling the story of Tough Boris, you have the illustration telling the story of the little boy who is on that pirate ship, and it's like an alter ego also, and you can quite clearly see that alter ego. So, but there are many Indian books like that, like I think Catch the Cat, which shows you the cat while the child cannot see the cat. That relationship between illustration and writing is something very, very beautiful. And the illustrations are a double page illustration. That itself gives the child space to get into. And I've been working a lot with children and teachers, tremendously so, with picture books. So they get, it's that you read the story through the pictures, not as much through and the writing becomes supplementary sometimes. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, also there are picture books which are wordless and there are no words and it says its own story as well. So, of course, the relationship between writing and illustration, I think, is a different 3-day workshop, Megha, that we need to do. Yeah, so of course, yes, Nivedita, you're absolutely right. And thank you for sharing that thought. And that is the also collaboration between, you know, illustrators and writers, and how much they talk and how much the illustrator sees a potential in the story that one has been given to illustrate, right? So that is also something which is very, very interesting. So just very quickly to go through other perspectives. So one is, of course, the characters in the village, but then we have a couple of books like you know, there's this beautiful book called Pedro and the Big Boom. Okay, this is about a little boy in Goa, in a little village in Goa, and it's a semi-urban space. So it's interesting, again, mining issues about how, you know, their playground and places where they play and grew up are going to be taken away, and very adventurous. And it's like, you know, it's interesting because the characters are like these young kids who want to like always solve problems and are out there, you know, trying to like make their life more interesting and exciting. And in that narrative, of course, you understand life through climate change and mining and problems that come. So again, very thin, with some illustrations kind of giving you breathers into reading. But yeah, the draw is the fact that it's an adventure book, and children who like reading kind of, you know, investigative and adventure things will definitely pick this book up. And then, of course, there are books like Savi and Bhura, which are very urban. So these are like children who are coming from super privilege. Their perspective is, of the news, and they see things only on the news. And then, of course, in the cloud called Bhura, really some shit happens in their own lives, and they see like this crazy like smog take over their city. And in Savi, of course, a lot of like magical things happen, and you know, their connection and directly with nature, but very urban setting, so very urban perspective, very easy to connect with urban children who are proficient readers. So that is, of course, a take you can take. But then if you take that perspective, you have to really make it very exciting, because why else will a child read? You're telling them their own story. Matlab, ye main padhu kyun? So you have to find a click where it is more exciting than what they are anyway living, right? So of course, it's easier to take a story from a, you know, a village or a semi-urban, because it's new for a city kid, especially if you're writing for a city kid. So it's easier, I would say. But if you're taking the perspective of an urban kid who's living in this crazy madness, then what is your story, and how will you make it exciting for a child who's living that life, right? So those are, of course, again, perspectives that you can take. This Uncle Nehru book that I gave you was that I showed you earlier is also very interesting because it's a historical perspective actually on how elephants reached all across the globe. And for me also this book was very interesting because I mean, elephants are an Asian animal, and now you find them in zoos, etc., all across the world, in Japan, in the US. So it's a very sweet story about independence and how Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru actually received some letters from kids across the world saying that, hey, Prime Minister of India, I heard you guys have elephant. I've never seen a live elephant. Can you send one to my country? And our crack Prime Minister actually sent also some elephants all across, right, by ship. So it's a very beautiful story. And at the end also it gives like a little disclaimer that, you know, at that time, no, we were a little dumb. Like we didn't know that sending elephants like this to other countries which is not like their environment and their natural habitat was a bad thing. We were really buddhu at that time. So this happened, but this is not a very good thing, you know. So it's an interesting idea. It's a historical perspective. It kind of gives you an idea of, you know, also the harm that one can cause when you take an animal out of its natural habitat and send them somewhere, right? So it talks about how an elephant reached in some other country, didn't eat for 3-4 days, everybody freaked out. So, you know, it's got potential. I think it's a very sweet book for younger children to understand that one elephant is native to a particular geographical location and it should not be like moved around. Of course, now with all these cheetahs come in our country, I'm just like reading all the crazy ideas about how it's good and how it's bad. You'll all know about this, right? So let's see if the cheetahs will have any achhe din in our country or not. But so that is one idea of historical perspectives. Of course, there are a lot of folk stories, you know, that talk and very embedded in nature, especially Indian stories, but any folk stories that I'm talking about. These are very interesting, again, to bring about our nature, our relationship with nature. So this is Water Stories, which is a great book, which is a compilation of stories from across the world, which are connected with water. And then there's also People and Wildlife. These are also stories from across India, very folk, and how, you know, life can be very connected with nature, and how these stories have elements of water and land and you know, animals. So that's, again, you know, for those of you who are not interested in writing a full novel, you're not interested in writing a picture book, you can write a short story, because there are publications are always compiling short stories as well. So that's also a very interesting space to write in.
It's a very important niche in terms of reader.
Yes. And they're easy to read because you don't have to, you're not compelled to read all the stories, right? And you can read it over a period of time. What I really wanted to show you all was this book, which is not an environment book, okay? Jamlo Walks is a book, beautiful book by Samina Mishra about COVID, okay? And about different perspectives of children who had to face the pandemic. So, of course, it's driven by this character Jamlo, who is, of course, a migrant laborer who's come to the city to work and has to find her way back home walking, which was a reality in our country. But while she walks, there are also perspective of children. So this is, of course, her perspective. And I mean, I wish I had more time and I would have read this story out to you all. It's really beautiful. But it's also about the perspective, as you can see, in a house where children are listening to news about kids like Jamlo and families like Jamlo who are walking across the city, and how parents are hiding this information because they think it's too much for them. You know, it's about you know, of course, her story keeps going on. It's about children looking out of their windows from tall towers and looking at the basti below, right? It's about children who are grumbling and cribbing about online school because they really miss their friends, with the baseline of this kid who's walking for miles and miles and miles and sleeping in forests, hungry, etc., right? So this is the reason why I tell you this book is because it allows you to understand perspective of the same situation in different situations, right? And for me, what is interesting is because we live in cities which are flooded all the time. Bangalore had floods, Mumbai had floods. It would be very interesting to have a story about different perspectives, different children who face floods in this way, where some actually just sit in the comfort of their homes in tall towers and enjoy the rain when it's pouring and pouring, celebrating no school, eating bhajiyas, drinking cups of hot chocolate, while others are running and scrambling and saving their school textbooks because everything's going underwater, right? And it's very interesting because this is a perspective that is missing. A book with one problem but with multiple perspectives. Yeah, so I think I think that is a perspective that one can look into, and it's a very interesting perspective. Of course, Big Rain is also a beautiful book by Tulika, and it talks about a lot of flooding, a lot of rain, but of course it tells you about how everyone has to like run and how everybody saves each other and helps each other, blah blah blah. So it's again very nice book, but I would love to do a exercise where all of you have to rewrite this book from different perspectives. You know, when there is a lot of rain, and then you have to kind of imagine. So you have to choose a demographic, you have to choose a space or not, you know. But it's interesting because we're all sharing a same space where there's a lot of rain, and then, you know, different perspectives of maybe even an animal like a dog or a cat, a stray, you know. So that's a space which is very delicious, and also it's very exciting always to have. It's done, but it's still always lovely. Yeah, I mean, Smith will be like, oh, what a boring idea. We've seen so many manuscripts like that, Timira. But I'm just saying, for writers who are, you know, writing, it's a great writing exercise because it really allows you to change perspective, tuck, tuck, tuck. Like you have to find 5 different ways of looking at the same thing. So it's a great writing exercise.
No, but I think I don't think I would say such a boring idea, because I think that change in perspective really helps. Like, I'll just to give you an example, there was a book that was published a couple of years ago by Pratham Books called Anand.
Yes.
And Anand is a beautiful book if you guys haven't already seen it, but it's about a garbage collector in a society. Anand picks basically collects garbage from home to home. And the book was originally written from a young boy's perspective, you know, who's looking at Anand, who comes every day and collects garbage. But then over time, after working and reworking the story, they realized that if the story is going to be about Anand, then why doesn't Anand get the voice? Why doesn't Anand get the autonomy to tell his own story? You know, and that kind of is so important for writers when they're able to look at the same story and say, okay, whose perspective should it be from? Because that also then gives that person whose perspective it is agency. And that's so important, especially in the time when we are talking about own voices, we are talking about diversity. Like, I think that exercise that Timita is talking about taking the same story and looking at it from different perspectives is so vital for writers. Sorry, my little 2-bit. I will go away.
No, I mean, that straight away, you know, the moment you switch perspective, if it's a perspective that you're familiar with, there is an authenticity that comes into your narrative, which readers always respond to. At least, I mean, you would have seen it on your end with the children. I have seen it in my children's sessions, where they can tell in authenticity like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's very true, Megha. I mean, that's something that is the final test of how well your book works with the children, right? And answering Shreyasi's question here, like what doesn't work, is when, you know, I have read lots of books which come from deep passion of an adult because they are conservationists or wildlife people, or like, oh, I went for a holiday to this national park and it was so crazy, like I have to share this you know, passion with children, or the passion for like some you know, extinct animal. And then the adult will start writing, but they'll write from their own perspective, okay, and they write a whole book talking about how, like, oh, full of adventure, oh, full of like plots and everything, but it's from an adult perspective. Please tell me why a child will want to read it, or an adolescent, or a teenager, or a young. मतलब मेरे को क्या पढ़ी है कि what excited you and what you did and who you met and what your journey was. I'm not interested. I'm 14, I'm 16, I'm 8. You know, my world is very different. It's not an adult world. But somehow a lot of authors kind of miss this, and they think that their passion will ignite as much excitement in young people. It doesn't. Okay, I'm being very, very honest. It doesn't. So if you're very passionate about it, is your responsibility, because you're writing for children. Otherwise, write for adults. No, I mean, nobody's stopping you. There are many wildlife conservationists who are writing books about their experiences, but write for adults. Don't write for children, because if you're writing for children, you have to inhabit their world. You have to understand what excites them. You know, and make your story theirs. Don't give them your story. This is very important. That yes, you may be very deeply excited about a national park, or you know, tigers in Tadoba or leopards in Ranthambore or whatever, but it cannot be your passion. You have to figure out a story, a perspective that comes from the world of a child, which will excite them, which will make that story theirs. And this is truly the challenge for children's writers, you know. And for me, like even a book like Chitti, which is very well, like people really like that book a lot, you know, and it's a beautiful book about us, you know, a dog living in a farmland, etc. But what also I come from a space with, this is not my, I have it also as well, you know, this is not my opinion. I'm telling you exactly how children respond to these books, right? Because I only take these books to the classroom all the time. Now, first of all, the author has not bothered to tell the audience, who is I live in a farm, I have a dog, but the whole story is I, but we don't know I. So I'm assuming that it is this person who has written the story, right? But you have not bothered to introduce yourself to me. I mean, which is very sad. As an author, as a reader, I'm like, okay, great. It's a story about Chitti. So why is Chitti not speaking? Then Chitti can tell me her story, you know? Matlab, why are you telling me Chitti's story? And because your life is very boring as an adult. Yeah, like you do this in the morning, then you do this, and then you feed Chitti, and then Chitti loves you a lot, and she licks you. हाँ, मतलब मेरे को ये पता है, but this is not very exciting for me as a young reader, right? I want to know, and honestly, when you pick up this book, and children pick it up because they love dogs, right? And then they realize, oh, this is not Chitti's voice. I is not Chitti, because the book starts with I, and you think that this is Chitti who's talking, but it's not Chitti. It's the owner of Chitti, who you meet halfway in the book, very randomly, in a photograph, like in an illustration, right? When something is scared, and you know, they are sitting here. This is the first time you actually see who I is in an illustration, which I think is irresponsible, because the reader wants to know who is talking to me. I don't know who's talking to me, right? And it becomes a problem, and it's a word-heavy book, as you can see, right? It's a lot, too many words on a page with pictures. So kids don't connect. I had to really very quickly start summarizing the book in the middle of the session, because they were just fidgeting, not interested. It didn't work. Honestly, the book didn't work. Okay, the illustrations were delicious, and they all wanted to know and see the pictures more, but they were not interested in the story. And it's because the author forgot to keep the child in mind. There also are no child. It's not important to have children characters, because this is the character. This is a very important character, but we don't know about this dog. You know, I mean, I would love to rewrite this story from Chitti's perspective, because also Chitti dies at the end, and it's great, you know, because it's 13 years of friendship and love and so much, and beautifully dies, like, you know, like gracefully. Even in the text, it's very nice, but kids didn't connect to it. Sorry, spoiler. Sorry, but it's okay.
I have to put on my taskmaster cap.
Yes, I'm done.
Please, just, you know, but I think there are also questions, and then I think we need to give everyone a small breather before we begin you know, Smith's session.
Okay.
But,
I have a point that relates to what Nimira's just said. May I quickly say? In terms of perspective, I test my short stories sometimes with kids, just to see how they're reacting to it. And I had this one story that I was doing this very innovative thing to say, and the character was he. So I started by saying he was tall, and that was literally my first sentence. He was tall, and the kid stopped me right away, said who. And the rest of my story fell apart after that because I hadn't explained who he was. That perspective wasn't clear. So your point is very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely start a story with who he was tall, but don't keep them waiting for like 17 pages before you tell them who he is.
Yeah,
Then it will fall
which
apart.
is my problem there.
Yeah, Megha, you had something to say.
I had one thing.
Yes, Shashwat, sorry. Yes.
Long years back, I had this conversation with Uncle Pai, and we were talking, and he had given me this the test for a good story. So he said it's evening time, and the kid is running out to play cricket with his friends, and you tell him a story, and he stops to listen to the story rather than going playing his cricket. That's a great story. So he always said that's the hallmark of a great story.
Nice. I like this benchmark. Cricket.
Megha had a question. I think Megha
Yes,
had-
Megha.
I actually, at the point where you were talking about Chitti, I just wanted to tell you that maybe it makes a difference that I read this story to my child and she loves this story. I don't know why. She pulls the book out of her bookshelf and wants to read it over and over. It might just be Raji Vibes illustrations or what it is. I don't know. But I don't know if it makes a difference that she's being read to because she's still little versus somebody who's able to read it themselves. I wanted to make the point while you were talking about Chitti. I think now it's in the past.
No, it's a
yeah.
great book. It's a great perspective. It's a great story. How little is your child, Megha? Just to know.
She's 5, so she can't read.
But you summarize it for her. You read word to word.
I have read it word to word and she is hooked. So that has happened as well. And she loves the book. She just keeps pulling. Can we read Chitti? Can we read Chitti? She wants to pull the book out.
The dog. They love dogs.
the dog. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so Smith, the objective of writing the story, I think I have covered in all of these conversations, honestly, just because it is really coming from this space of, why are you writing what you're writing? And I think that is something that I've already covered, so I'm not going to cover it as a separate topic. But yeah, I think I have managed to complete everything that I wanted to. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was perspectives through a metaphor. So that is also a very interesting idea that one can use where it's not direct about like a topic or a climate. So I recently, picked up this gorgeous book called Sommersi. It's an Italian book. It's a wordless picture book. Okay. And it's called Immersed. Okay. So you can see the water that's coming. And it's a very interesting book. And I mean, Smith will also want to see it because it's a new book. So
Yeah.
I said,
I've immediately put you on speaker view so I can see it in big.
Yeah. So it's about animals, of course, and it's about how they all live their very busy lives. And suddenly one day they realize that there's a little bit of water in the city that's kind of filling up. But they're like, whatever, we have to do our own thing. You see, and there's water on the floor level, right? So they're all walking around, doing their thing, replying to emails, going to work, doing their thing. And then suddenly, like, they realize that, the water's kind of, coming up to the level of their waist. And where are those beautiful illustrations? One second. You see that the little creatures have found a way to survive because they're just like, we can't walk anymore. Acha, the boat lagega, chalo boat kharid lete hain, and then of course there is other things that are happening. You see, they have found a way to breathe because they're like, this is the new reality. Chalo, ye bhi kar lete hain. Because there are many people who are not being affected as much, right? So they're like, arey, abhi important nahi hai ye. Like, look at the giraffes. They're just like having normal business conversations because they're just like, what problem? What are you talking about? What water? And like the bigger animals are like, it's okay. We'll just fill buckets and put the water out of our house. Kidhar aur jayega? Mera to nahi hai na ye problem. So, and as you see, like, things are getting very expensive as well because these are very important now in the market, right? Things are on discount. And of course, there is a day when things are looking really bad and even elephants and giraffes are going under. And that's when they start protesting. So you see lots of protest boards everywhere. Yeah, so they're just like, oh, there's something wrong. Everyone has to do something. There's a need now. And then they realize that nobody's going to do anything. So then they all have to kind of come together and solve this problem together. So they all come together and figure out that they got to pull the plug. What a metaphor, right? So they're all like, together this way. And they're trying to pull the drain. They're trying to open it. And of course, the drain gets opened, as you can see. And then there's a mad chaos where everybody is twirling around and whirling around in that. And finally, the kind of water kind of recedes, goes away. And, they're cleaning up. And of course, they realize that, I think there's another problem. This rhino is looking out and seeing and says, I think we have something else to worry about now. Okay, so it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor that we don't see things until it's here, right? We don't care about it until it's here. And climate change is a very big, thing. So you can also use metaphors to show a very interesting perspective. Yeah. So these are very wise books, which are right up there somewhere, we will, yeah. So it's really nice that we can think on those levels as well. Yes. Sar ke upar pani. Yes, we can do a Hindi book on this. So it's a really great metaphor to work on. So with that, I'm going to leave you back to Megha, and I hope that the stuff that we discussed was helpful for you. And yeah.
One question, sorry.
Yes,
this was about the idea of I posted on ambiguity, because many of these stories, sometimes there's this pressure to end a story in a certain way. And when we're talking about things happening on an environmental scale, they're open-ended. And if one wants to convey the sense that it's not a story that is over, it's not complete, there are still things happening, but you want to just offer a perspective. There is no end to that story.
Correct.
How is that viewed usually? Is that the sense of not having an ending per se, like a conventional ending? So for does that work for children, or is it like, I somehow feel that they're much more perceptive to open-ended, but there is usually this pressure of, okay, ye story khatam kahan ho rahi hai? So what are your views on that? And
do you read a lot, Deborah? Do you read children's literature? Are you well versed?
Yeah, I do read a lot. I've so that's, I've sort of struggled personally also, like, when there's this tendency to maybe have like a coherent ending, but I also feel that that's not always required.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure Smith will talk about it more, but I feel like it depends on the story, right? Like if it's a picture book and it's an episode that needs an ending, then you need to kind of end it. But if it's something which is part of life, then life doesn't end. So then the story can't really have an ending in that sense. But some closure is important, I guess, which you can manage to show. But it really depends on the format of what you're writing. And, so there is no like one answer to that question.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to be a party pooper, and thank you so much, Timira. Lots and lots of books to mull over. But I think if I were to take, as a writer and as a publishing person, take away some things from this session, it would be, one, of course, you cannot force things. Like, one of the things is when you're writing for children, I think this was something Venkat had also asked at the very beginning of our day-to-day about, putting yourself in the child's shoes. Yes, that is important to know what might be important to your reader. And children readers are no different. When you write for adults, one would like to think of what might interest my audience. And the same goes for children. When you're writing for children, what might interest children? And then, tailoring your narrative to that, which is something which Smith is going to take us through in greater detail in her session. The other thing is never forcing it because you're writing for children. And never, with this a variety of books that Timira has taken us through, and the various books that she has, I think most of these are books, Timira, you have worked with, taken to children. So that is always interesting to hear, because through her perspective, one also gleans what the kids she's taken these books to have been thinking of these books. So it's very important to also not, like, there shouldn't be a grain of inauthenticity or unnaturalness when one is writing for readers who are younger than you. Treat them as any reader, treat them as, give them agency, think of them as people who are going to read your book, but don't make that a limitation for yourself, because the moment you start striking a false beat, children are no different than adults. In fact, they can be very ruthless in pointing out inauthenticity in books. I have seen it time and again, and actually picking holes in narratives that have come from a place of wanting to talk down to them because they are younger. So that is really, like, in none of the books that you showed us today, Timira, something which is common is they do not talk down to children. They respect their audience, and that is really one of the most important things. So thank you so much. I am sure you all will have other questions. Please feel free to put your questions in our WhatsApp group, and I shall forward these to Timira and forward her responses to you. Or you can email Shashwat and I, and we'll be happy to get answers if things strike you later on. But for now, I think we'll take a quick 2-minute breather before we begin mid session. Blue breaks, water breaks, quick bite breaks, anything. But I'm not going to give you too much of time, I'm afraid, because otherwise the session will carry on, and I'm sure all of you being adults have a lot to do. So thank you, Timira. And yes, I'm going to intro Smith in a bit, but for now we'll just take a quick 2-minute break to do whatever, we want to gather our books, gather our thoughts, anything.
Thank you, Timira. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Timira. Yes.
You're welcome. And thank you all the participants.
Thank you so much.
Okay, is everyone in?
Yes.
Yes, Megha.
Yeah. Are we still, I mean, I'm just, yeah, I think we have, okay, all 21 in the house. So Smith Zaveri, Smith Zaveri is one of the, I can say without, bet my money on it, that she's one of the finest young editors we have in children's publishing in India today. And I should make a full disclaimer. I worked with Smith on 2 books, both of my books, which Timira referred to in her session, Unearthed and After Midnight. And I've worked in children's publishing for 14 years. And, there'll be editors who can point out, copy editing mistakes in your text, or, possibly tell you that something isn't quite working. But I think the ability to read a narrative and tell you precisely what is not working about it in terms of workable solutions and structuring is something which we need more of, that quality in our editors in children's publishing. There are very few, unfortunately, it's in our field, but Smith is one of them. I can safely say that, having worked on 2 books with her. Bijal Vacharajani, Rohan Chakravarti, Deepak Dalal. She's worked with some of the biggest names writing for children on the environment. She was formerly with Penguin Random House India, and she's currently with Pratham Books. Smith has taken sessions with both her alma maters, Mount Carmel College and the Oxford Brookes University in the UK. In today's session, because we had the Mira session earlier and we got an overview of books from the perspective of, how readers respond to these books, and how she, as somebody who's taking these books to readers, has sort of, her feedback on books was tailored around what she's gleaned in her experiences of taking these books to children. Smith is going to break down the publishing process for us. How does one tailor a narrative to fit this whole realm of writing books for children? And, what are the practical challenges and opportunities for writers? So without much ado, I'm going to hand it over to Smith. I know we've run a little over time, but we'll try to make it up. And if any of you, for whatever reason, have to leave early, please just put in that you have to leave early into the chat box. I will be, as I said, will be sending you notes and book records from both the sessions today. But even other than that, if you have some specific questions for our instructors, I shall make it a point to forward these to them and get you the answers. So with that, Smith, let's begin.
Thank you, Megha. That was really kind, and I'm a little flustered after that introduction. But thank you so much for that. Hello, everyone. I'm quickly just going to do a tech check. Can you see the books that I'm presenting the right way or the wrong way?
We can.
We can, right?
Yes.
You can see it the right way. Okay, cool. So, like Megha mentioned, what I want to do is lofty, ambitious stuff, but let's see how much we can get into the next 1 hour to talk you through just writing in a way that you can get published. So what are people looking for? How can you present your idea in ways that you might be able to find publishers to pick up your books? Even if you're just doing this for yourself, then what is the right way to train yourself to think of ideas? How do you know whether an idea is good or not? We're going to go through all of this. I also want to go through a little bit about character development, a little bit about how to write your pitches, a little bit about what stays in and what goes out when you're creating a book. All of these things are what we talk about in the next 1 hour. But before we begin, as is tradition with almost any children's book session, we start with reading a book. And so I'm going to share my screen. I'm now going to be doing the reading of this one. We have somebody who's already created a beautiful video of it. So we're going to just listen and let me know if my audio is not shared, but I'm just going to.
Smith, you have your earphones on. So before playing, would you need to remove them?
No, system sound should hopefully go. So it should be all right. So I'm just going to share sound and share my screen. You guys can see my screen, yes? Yeah, everyone can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes,
Cool. So this book is called Do Is Stuck. It's written and illustrated by Carson Ellis, and I'm going to open up the room for questions, comments, anything, and we'll have a discussion on this book before we jump in. So please enjoy. Do Is Stuck. Give me a second. I'm just going to see my playback speed is normal. I watch videos on 1.2x usually, so it's normal. Cool.
Do Is Stuck, written and illustrated by Carson Ellis. Du ist Tag, Manazut. Tata. Du ist Tag, Ma ebedau plank. Du kima plank. Manazut. Ru bada ribo. Su. Bore intin iki. 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 Ru bada ribo. Ribo. Ru dadin dudin fort. Su. Su. Roop fort. Vubeck. Booby Vubeck. Roop fort. Sue. Du ist Tag. Ooh. Ho, Uki. Gladenboot. Is Gladenboot. Gladenboot. Scrivadelli Gladenboot. Gladenboot. So. Ist Tag Gladenboot. Gladenboot. Tata udas. Tata iki. Tata uki. Tata fort. Du ist Tag. Tata.
Thank you for watching that. That book always makes me smile really stupidly when I watch this video, and I have watched it multiple times. But I wanted to just open up the room very quickly for thoughts, impressions about this. Why did I show this video? Why did I start the session with this? I'd love to hear from all of you. And please feel free to ask as many questions, to interrupt me. I work best in a conversation rather than a silent room. So please would anybody like to go? Any impressions about this?
Smith, this was in which language?
So this is a gibberish book. It's actually a book that is an English language book. That's the premise. So. Any thoughts?
It was beautiful. Like there were like, in a sense, I've not read this kind of work before, but and I was initially when I started, I was a bit hesitant if I know where this is going, because as a person I like to be sure of things. But when it started saying is the utag, I thought, does that mean is that it? And the way the flower was conceptualized, the way the sounds went, like when they started to find something and the ladder came in, so things started to make sense. So yeah.
Thank you. That's you're absolutely right that when you do approach this book at the very beginning, you do start from a place of I don't understand, and that's a really important point to remember. And we'll come back to this idea of I don't understand, approaching a book from, okay, this is new to me, this is alien to me, and we'll come back to that point. I really should keep a notebook and note these things down. Good. Nivedita. Sorry,
Yeah.
Megha.
No. Yeah, I was just going to say Nivedita, and then we'll take Maria's question before proceed.
Yeah. So I don't have a question. I've read this book. I have this book, fortunately. When I saw this book and worked with children, I felt it is a beautiful book, because for children especially, because they put their own story into the book. There could be so many perspectives and so many ways of interpreting the pictures. When you showed the video, actually there is intonation in it, and the intonation actually points to certain things. The intonation gives more meaning than if you see the book raw. So when the child says it when different children say it with their own intonation, it becomes a different book for each child. So that is the beauty, I thought.
Thank you, Nivedita. We'll that's actually a really, really important point. And that's especially so true when we develop picture books. And we'll go into that a little bit more. I have a whole stack of picture books that I want to show you guys, and we'll go into that idea of the child bringing themselves and their interpretation of something into the reading of a book, and where our role as an author and an editor ends, and where we're sort of allowing space for a child to enter the conversation, a child to enter the narrative. And that kind of ties back to Deborah's point about ambiguity as well, and an ending. And so we'll just touch upon that as well.
There's a question from Maria, which will be, I'll request everyone to kind of, because we want to end on time as well, to keep your questions crisp. And if you have any thoughts, to share them in the chat box, instead of,
So we have Maria as well as Maitreyi.
Okay.
Yeah. Maria, do you want to go?
Yeah, mine is not a question. It was just an observation. Like,
please.
I like especially the music was so mesmerizing, and even though it was gibberish, the way it was narrated, the intonations, the process, and all helped me understand the story.
Yeah. Maitreyi?
Yeah, very similar to what Maria said. I think even the language, it's repetitive, so as you don't understand what it means, but you still see that there's some things repeating, and that probably helps you create your own words or story.
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me, when I look down, I'm just making notes so I can refer back to them, and we can connect everything that we're talking about into what we're doing. Thanks, Maitreyi. If there are no more thoughts, I'll quickly just say a couple of more things about this. The reason, you're absolutely right, that this book is in gibberish, it's not in English. And when you first enter the book, you are met with this hesitation of, I don't understand, it is all gibberish. I do not understand what is happening. Am I going to understand the book? And I think this is a great space to start working on any book, throw back to Megha's question about text and visuals. Absolutely. And we'll go into that as well with this very particular book about text versus visuals. So approaching anything from this idea of, I'm hesitant, I don't understand what this book is doing, because a lot of times your reader will be approaching it from the same space, especially when we're talking about something as complex as environment, as climate change, as nature. Your reader does not have the base information that you already have as an author, because you're approaching your writing as an adult. And so two things happen. Either you operate from a place of, okay, I'm going to assume that the reader has a certain amount of knowledge and I'm going to build on that, or I'm going to give them every explanation possible because they don't know. So I'm going to give them all of the information on a platter, so it's easier for them to understand what I'm trying to say. And while both of these perspectives, like there's no right or wrong in the way you do things, what does tend to happen is we either overcomplicate things or oversimplify things. And you're alienating your reader in both of them. And the reason why this book works so beautifully is because the book is letting the child sit with that discomfort, because the creator of the book also knows that children are very, very curious as readers. They're very open-ended. They don't come with the biases that we often approach our reading with. They don't come with these preconceived notions that we often approach our writing with. And so you can allow that space to sort of exist in your book, where you're just like, okay, I'm treating my reader as an intelligent, curious reader, and they will understand what I'm trying to say. Because in this particular book, what the author very clearly does and cleverly does is that because she is the author as well as the illustrator, she's like, I'm going to let my art do all of the explaining, and I'm going to invite the reader to give words to my art. And so at the very core of it, is this a nature book? I think it very much is a nature book, because it's looking at a life cycle of a plant, right? It's looking at like the cyclical nature of the world that we live in itself. It starts with a little bud, it ends with a little bud. You sort of see, you see the insects changing as well. You see the weather changing as well. You see the time of day, you see the month changing. You see the moon, which goes from big to small to almost disappears. You have all of these clues that have been very carefully laid out to the reader without using any text whatsoever, right? Perspective equals the communities. Yeah, absolutely. It is the community's perspective. It is every reader's, it is the child's perspective as well. So there's two different perspectives at play here. A community as well as the reader's perspective of, okay, what is happening? I get to decide what is happening in this particular book. And that is precisely why this book works so well and achieves so many things. I don't know, Tamira, if you've used this book in the classroom, and if, you know. Yeah.
I've absolutely used it, and it's magic. It's just magic. Yeah.
And to bring about another point that was mentioned, which was repetition, right? Maitri, you mentioned that, you know, or Shrey, sorry, I can't remember. But one of you mentioned that because then do is tak gets repeated one more time. Iki gets repeated. Glarenboot gets repeated. Slowly you start making these connections. Slowly you start realizing, oh, okay, I get it. And that repetition works so beautifully. And if any great picture book, the best picture books out there, know how to use repetition to make a point. The Giving Tree, and the tree was happy. That's repetition. And the reason it works is because every single time you repeat a sentence, you're adding a layer upon a layer upon a layer upon a layer to something that you're trying to say. With the Giving Tree, and the tree is happy suddenly becomes a heavier and heavier and heavier statement every single time. And so this debate of whether this book should have been written or not, whether such books should exist or not, I think this book should exist because the book is very aware of the problematic politics, you know, and this is happy, and the tree was happy is doing all of that heavy lifting for the book, right? So repetition is so very important in picture books as well. And so that's why I wanted to start. And the third reason, actually, I wanted to start with this video is because I want all of us to dismantle this idea of we know what a children's picture book looks like, or we know what a children's book itself looks like. Because the beauty of children's books is that there is so much scope, so much space for experimentation. India is still a very small market. We're still learning how to create better books. And I say this as somebody who has also created some not very great books in these last few years. Like I'm aware of it, and we're getting better with every single book that we create. And there is space for that experimentation now. And so we should also allow our writing to not follow a set idea of what we think a book is, right? So from there, I want to jump to another idea. And we sort of build on that idea throughout the session, which is when you're writing a book, and especially when you're writing something like about nature, right? The idea here is you're not just doing this for fun. I mean, of course you're doing this for fun. You're doing this because it's a creative outlet for you. You're doing this because it's entertaining for your reader. But when you're deliberately writing about nature, you also have, in some ways, a little bit of an agenda, right? You want to inform the reader about something. You want to show them something. You want to teach them something. You want them to understand a certain perspective. And so there's always a fine balance between what is more important. Is my story more important, or is my message more important? So I'm going to open that question out to you guys if anyone wants to respond to it. It's a pretty straightforward question. It might seem like, is the story more important or is the message more important? But like, I think this ties back to the very first conversation about like moral and learning from books. So where does learning and morality and like this idea of like a message, however shrouded that message is, where does that fall into the way we create picture books or we create books? Anyone?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. So as I see, I hope my voice is audible.
Yes, all good.
Okay. So as I see, the story is at the heart of it, and the talks of messages and morality, it is up to the reader what he or she can take from the book or would like to take from the story. The story is ultimately at the focus of it. That's how I see it.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. Nivedita in chat had said, does my message kill my story? Which is, I think, a spot on question to ask ourselves as creators. Minaz, had you put your hand up? You're not audible.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I was just wondering whether this entire process has to be binary. I mean, does it have to be either or is there a way to bring about a balance where the message and the story both come together?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And this ties into the idea of does my message kill the story? Because of course it doesn't have to be a binary. It is always a fine balance between story and message. But it's up to us as creators to know where that line is. So I think that's a really good place for you to start your creation, to start your writing, and I know we have some illustrators here as well, to start your art with what is my message and what is my story. Like, I think it's really important for us to know, to define both of these things when we're writing it, and then to build on them. Because a lot of times what happens is, and we get a lot of proposals where this will happen, where somebody will very passionately pitch this idea of, okay, I want to create this book because I want my kids to grow up understanding that this is how the world works, and I want my kids to understand that death is very hard. So a lot of times our impetus to write does come from this need to share this message. But because you're so focused on this is what I want the child to take away from the book, you forget to either include the child in the book. Is what Timira was mentioning about the national park thing, right? About I went to a national park and I really want to tell kids about this national park experience, that you forget to invite the reader in. And that's because you're so fixated on your message. But what you instead need to be doing is, what is my story? How do I hook a reader in? And then once my reader is hooked, how do I create this undertone of, okay, this is what the story really is about, The book that does it really well, that Timira had mentioned, is The One and Only Ivan. Right? At the start of it, it's a story of a friendship. It's a story of a friendship between this gorilla and this baby elephant. It's Ivan's story. Ivan is telling you about just the life that he lives. He lives in captivity, but he doesn't know it yet. Ivan is being Ivan. He's doing everything that he's ever known, right? And then slowly, as you read Ivan's story, as Ivan tells you about his day, about what he likes doing, about the TV that he watches, about the billboard that's there, about his friend, you slowly you pick on the pieces, you join them, and you realize what really is happening. Venkat, can I call you Venkat? Is that okay? I'll just get you in just a second. And that's because the writer very clearly knows that, yes, I do have a message, but what is more important right now is, do I have a story? Do I have a story within which my message doesn't just fit in, where my message is sort of organically being delivered to my reader, where the reader can pick up on it, but that's not the most important thing. Maybe they'll pick up on it on the second reading. Maybe they'll pick up on it when somebody reads it out aloud or when they have a discussion about it later. But when will it be memorable? It'll be memorable when that story is memorable first. And then they'll slowly sort of start mulling over what was really being said. That's what Bijal does very beautifully in her writing. Bijal's writing is never directly about, oh, okay, I want to teach you about climate change. No, it's about friendship, it's about grief, it's about death. It's about all of these things. That's what Line Tender is about. And then you sort of have an undertone of what that message is. Venkat, let's go. Sorry for keeping you waiting for so long.
No, that's all right. Because my question is related to what you're talking about now, which is there, when you talk about story and couching it in a story, are you saying it needs to be entertaining? Entertainment versus boredom. If it's boring, the kid's not going to read it anyway. So I need to make it entertaining and then slip in the message somewhere there.
I don't know if other people will disagree with me, but my response to that is hell yes. Because if you don't have something, and I think entertaining is one word to look at it. Sometimes it doesn't have to be entertaining. It has to be gripping, right? It has to have a hook, because what is the point of having this amazing message if you didn't get your reader to page 12 where your message is hidden, right? If you didn't hook your reader at the very get-go, then you've lost your reader already. Then all of your effort has been futile. One and Only Ivan, the very, very first page, it starts, it's a really short chapter. This is literally the opening chapter of this book. It says, the chapter is called Hello. And the chapter is, I am Ivan. I'm a gorilla. It's not as easy as it looks. That's it. That's chapter 1. And then you're invited to turn the page. Would you turn a page to an opening chapter like that? Like, I don't think any of us, Megha, you're on mute. And if you were saying something.
No. Why don't you finish that point? There was something I wanted to say in line with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, guys, for the last 2 years, I do read a lot of books on the environment, but for the last 2 years, I have been very sort of critically reading these books for the curation we do at the Green Lake Fest. And what I find is the best books are written from a place where you're not treating nature as a sort of, the way the schooling system is almost othering the whole environmental narrative. And where you're approaching it, I want to write a book on the environment. And so you're like, that is what is clouding your whole narrative. The best books, the ones which we enjoy the most, are the ones that actually build on connections that we've forgotten that we have with the environment as people, as, as individuals. That's really the key. When it comes, of course, I write nonfiction. So obviously I'm starting from a place where I want to sort of write this sort of, text for my write. I'm not really writing a story. But even so, even in my nonfiction, the idea is that I want to present nonfiction that is building on something which my reader already has. That is the key to, I think, writing really great nature books, where it plays upon what you already are as individuals, what children are observing, what children are not observing, but is very much part of their everyday. That's just my 2 cents worth of what makes a really great book on environment. Yeah.
No, that's a really, really good point, which is tying your story, tying your message, tying anything that you're doing with that sense of familiarity. Because we're going to be presenting a lot of unfamiliar things later in the book to our reader. It might be familiar to some readers, it might not be familiar to some readers, but there is going to be that space at some point where there will be that unfamiliarity. So how do you then get the reader to understand where this is coming from? So you do need some aspect, some element of oh, I know this. This is a world that I understand. Right? Megha, you have a thing which says, is it really important to have a message? If you wrote something existential without a message, is it something that doesn't work for a pitch? Actually, can you explain your point a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to struggle to understand what is a message, because a story is a narrative where you're talking about an experience or something, and what message somebody draws from it is left to the reader. Is my understanding of it. But when you say message, does it really mean it has to be something that, especially I think in nature writing, coming back to that, do you really need to have a message and make, does it have to be about climate change or something that's very relevant, or is that what publishers are looking for? I think I don't know if I'm clear, but
I think message is a very loose term when we use message. The idea is that, okay, every book is about something, right? At the end of the day, like, even when you're making a pitch, the first question, or when you tell someone, oh, I'm writing a book, the first question they're going to ask you is, oh, what is it about?
Okay.
And then you're going to have to think about, okay, but what is my book about? And I was going to come to this at the very end where we talk about pitch, right? Like, how do you pitch your book? In filmmaking, they use something called the elevator pitch, right? And the reason why the elevator pitch works so well is because we as human beings have very, very limited attention spans. So if you're not able to tell me what your book or what your creation is about in the course of like an elevator, not one of those super fast Mumbai elevators that are going like 54, not one of those, the regular elevator, you've lost me. And so what is your book about? You can't say, oh, so my book starts with a boy and the boy goes on a journey and then the boy meets a gorilla. And that is your action, right? That is your story. That is your arc. That is your beginning, your middle, your rising action, falling action. At the core of it, what is your book about? And how much of that are you showing? How much of that are you telling? How much of that are you leaving for the reader to decipher? These are questions you need to ask yourself as an author. And that is basically what I mean by message. Now, specifically when we're talking about nature writing, in this particular case, of course, we're operating from a place of agenda. Let me grab a couple of books and we can just break this down because that was something that I wanted to talk about anyway. Genre format. How do you decide how to fit the idea that I have into a format that somebody is looking for, right? And sure, you have fiction and you have nonfiction. You have picture books, you have chapter books, you have middle grade books, you have early chapter books, you have young adult books, you have graphic novels. You have all of these different methods of putting your story out. How do I decide what it's going to be about? So let me pick this book, which is called How the Myna Ate the Sun. Okay. So that's one book that we look at. And another book that we will look at is a book that I actually have mixed feelings about, but we'll talk about that. It's called The Snail with the Right Heart. Okay. Both of these books are actually very, very situated in a scientific concept. That's the idea of the book. That's where the book sort of came out from, right? With this particular book, it was supposed to be a book about food chains. Okay. How do I teach a young child? This is a Pratham book, so it has a level against it. If you look at Pratham books, all Pratham books have a key. This is a nice key for you to understand. It's got 4 levels. It starts from is my child able to read? Is it a read aloud? Do they have very basic sort of understanding of how to read smaller sentences? Are they able to compute larger sentences, larger concepts? And then are they able to confidently, independently read? Right? So you're working with those levels. And so this is supposed to be a book for readers who do have some fair idea and a sense of reading and of the world. And they're supposed to teach them about food chains. But the way this does it is basically by showing you how the myna ate the sun. And immediately you're just like, okay, what do you mean the myna ate the sun? You can't eat the sun. Like the sun is really hot, right? And that's the first question that you'll be met with. But Miss, how can a myna, the bird is so small, how can it eat the sun? You already have an interesting hook, right? And then what the book does is it basically just explains how a food cycle works, how the leaves capture, like they have the sun in them, and how somebody eats the leaf, and then somebody eats that somebody, and then somebody eats that somebody else, and then slowly you sort of go up the food chain and you see that the myna has eaten the last creature who ate the other creature, who ate the other creature, who ate the other creature, who ate the leaf, who had the sun in it. And that's your food chain, very, very simply explained. Nowhere in the book, though, in the 12, 16 pages that this book is, does it mention the word food chain at all. Nowhere does it say, oh, because the leaf has the sun in it. Nowhere does it do that at all. Instead, what it has at the very end is an explainer page. Very simply, very easily written, where you're just like, what you just witnessed, the myna ate the sun because of the food chain. And this is how a food chain exists, and this is how a food web exists. Right? And so what you've very carefully done is you have kept the story at the center of it. You've kept that narrative at the center of it, and you have found a way to talk about food chains without ever mentioning food chains at all. Right? But someone's learned something new with it. And that's what a really good nonfiction picture book can do, where you're able to take something very familiar. The setting is familiar, it's a garden. The character is familiar, it's a bird, it's a myna. We've seen this myna outside of our homes, in trees, in parks quite often, right? So you've taken all of that the familiarity. You've seen, a lot of kids might have seen mynas actually eat insects. And now suddenly you're just like, okay, this is why they're eating it. This is what is happening. This is what it means, right? You're leaving space for those connections. And so, which is why like this book works quite well in that sense, because it's letting the reader sort of understand it while also very, very, very firmly being a non-fiction picture book. Like nowhere is it saying, oh, this is fiction. It's not, it's a non-fiction picture book. But okay, let's look at this particular book, The Snail with the Right Heart, which is just like, the illustrations in it are mind-blowing. You want to live in these illustrations. You want to sleep inside this book in these illustrations. That's how beautiful it is. But this book works with metaphor a lot. It's looking at a scientific concept. It's looking at genetics. It's looking at gender. It's basically looking at like a snail that has an inverse heart, basically, and the snail has to find the perfect snail. It's very, very complicated. But because it's so complicated, what the authors tried to do is explain that complication within the book itself. And at least that was my reading of it. Like for me, there was so much science in it. There was this need to explain what was happening in it all throughout the book that it marred my reading of the book. Because otherwise there's beautiful writing in it. There are these metaphors of time and of life and of death running through this book. And this book is also for slightly older readers than the myna book. But because you have also taken it upon yourself to explain the science behind it, as opposed to saying there was once a snail that didn't have a heart that was quite right. And then you just pick it up from there. You have gone ahead and explained the scientific concept within it. And you've kind of lost your reader. At least for me, you've kind of lost me as a reader to say, okay, this is one of my most favorite books, because you tried to over-explain the science in it. Right? So these are some ways of doing picture books. Why don't we do one thing? Why don't we, I'm gonna combine genre format as well as what are the different forms that nature writing can take. And I'll take you through some books of how that can be done. So let's start with nonfiction itself, since we are clearly talking about nonfiction. There's many different ways of presenting nonfiction. One of the ways that you can actually, wait, what is that book? Is this book. It's called The Three Waterdrop Brothers. Okay. And this particular book, The Three Waterdrop Brothers, is taking you through the life cycle of water cycle. What happens when it rains? Where does the water go? Right? And where does the water travel to? How does water change form? How does it change shape? It does that, but it does this in a very fable-ish manner. There were once three Waterdrop brothers, right? And that's kind of, it starts in a very fable kind of way, a once upon a time story. A long, long time ago, planet Earth was born. Planet Earth was very, very hot. Lava gushed out of the ground, here, there, everywhere, creating vapor. And then you move on, and then they use sound words. They sort of explain the water cycle to you. And they explain how the Earth was formed. And that's when you meet these three brothers. And it reminds me of like the Harry Potter, the story in Harry Potter with the three brothers who sort of each go out and do their own thing. Like that's kind of how they've framed this whole story, right? About how there were 3 brothers, and the brothers grew curious about the outside world. And so the brothers decided to go on an expedition. And so each brother goes and does a different thing. One decides to get absorbed by the earth. One decides to go and join a river. One decides to immediately evaporate into the air. And so you kind of use this fable to talk about the water cycle instead. And that's in some ways kind of what Carson Ellis is also doing by using this frame narrative of, look at these insects, they're just exploring this interesting creature that has erupted from the earth. And then you sort of look at the cycle. So you can look at fables as a way of presenting your nonfiction. You can go with something like Amu's Bottle Boat, right? Which is basically looking at a very realistic sort of lived experience of a child. Of this child sees this bottle, and the child sort of sends this bottle off as a boat into the water, and then you kind of see what happens. You follow the bottle and you follow the child as well. So you kind of like present a very everyday scenario, something that's super familiar, and then teach a concept through it in your nonfiction. So that's one way of doing it. So one of the things that we do at Pratham Books that is at the very core of what Pratham Books does, right? And this is something I have recently learned as well, just by working with amazing creators, is this understanding that you cannot get a child to be invested in your message if they're not invested in the thing itself, right? And that's tapping into this very primal idea of, I love my earth. I love this world. I love nature. I love the environment. I love the air. And when you've done that, when you've created that space for them to be invested in what it is that they're trying to save, immediately that's your job like already done for you. And so one of the ways of looking at nonfiction is to sort of like build compassion in kids, right? It's like these books do that. Happy as a Hen, Duga, and we'll go into this because this is also a wordless picture book that does it. And Beauty is Missing, where the idea is that your agenda or whatever you're trying to do is basically just to show a beautiful world and to get kids to be invested in the world. And that is a great way to sort of start off. That's a great way to sort of start off with your writing as well, is to establish that baseline of, okay, I love something and I need to protect it, right? And that's a really, really good way of thinking of nonfiction as well. Then as you grow older, as a child is able to grasp more, understand more, you can go into more complicated things. Like Tamira mentioned the Uncle Nehru book, which looks at animals, but which also looks at history, right? So you can present nature, you can present environment through events. Megha's book does that so well, Unearthed. And sorry, I'm a biased person as well, because like I worked on the book, but like it's a genuinely great book. But like if you look at Unearthed, right? It's presenting environment through history. It's presenting environment through people. Something that's on the rise that publishers are really, really looking for now is picture book biographies. The book Tamira that Tamira talked about, the Lavanya Karthik book about Janki Amal. That is a biography series, and picture book biographies are just like booming right now in the market. And not just picture book biographies, also biographies of for slightly older readers. So if you look at this book, which is once again Duckbill, 10 Indian Champions. I'm with you, Tamira, I'm with you. 10 Indian Champions, which looks at 10 different people working in the environment space and telling their story, right? Biographies are a great way to explore nature, to explore writing. That was going to literally be my next one as well, was Salim Mamu. Like I have it here. And Salim Mamu is a really, really good book to read because you'll also be meeting Zai, who's coming tomorrow, who wrote this book, Salim Mamu and me. Biographies, really, really powerful. There's a new book that was just published called Little Jagdish and the Great Experiment, which is basically about Jagdish Chandra Bose and his experiment his love for plants as a young child, and how he does this experiment, which he later conducts as he grows older and older and older. And then you suddenly realize that, oh, he's discovered that plants like music, that plants like, things like that. So the Jagdish Chandra book, for example. So picture book biographies are a really great way of presenting nonfiction as well. The other great,
we have a lot of actually books on when we were on Jagdish Bose, especially. Yeah,
we do. Sorry, I have 3 more books to show, 4 more books to show in nonfiction, and then we'll quickly jump to fiction. 5 more books, maybe. I'm out of control. And one more that I can't remember now, but we'll get to it. Okay, another way to show nonfiction is to basically just, and this is one of Harini's books. It's called So Many Leaves. So if you look at So Many Leaves, as well as How Big is a Whale Shark, what it's doing is it's working with really young kids to present diversity in nature. What do different creatures look like? How big is one creature against another? It's working with this prime idea of kids are very curious. They want to know things. Like they want to know, oh, what is the shape of this leaf? Why is this leaf shaped like this, but why is that leaf shaped like that? You know, and so then I know somebody has, if I'm not mistaken, a book on sleep.
Yes.
How different animals sleep. And so like, that's a really great way. And you'll see Platinum Books has a lot of these kinds of books about different tongues, different beaks, about claws, because what it's doing is it's basically teaching kids about nature. It's getting them interested in understanding how nature works. What are the different things that exist in nature? It's making them observers. And it's only when you observe that you then realize that, okay, things are changing in nature. Patterns are changing in nature. Why are patterns changing? Oh, climate change. You've already given them a really strong foundation now when you've done that, right? So that's So Many Leaves. Okay, I'm going to skip all of those extra books that I want to show you. And the last way to present something is to present it using history. So if you look at this book, The Black Tide, this looks at an oil spill. This looks at an actual oil spill that happened off the coast of France. And it looks at it through the story of this young child whose father is basically a fisherman. And his father can't fish because there's oil in the fish now. And so you're looking at this very, very core idea. Another book that does that really well is This Town is by the Sea, which looks at mining. Once again, child's perspective, father is a miner. Father goes out every day to mine. And this child is just sitting there, you know, living life, is doing his own thing, is talking about this town that he lives in that's by the sea, where people mine every day, where this is what life is like. And then suddenly something changes. And what is the thing that changes? So you're presenting a life, you're presenting a historical event that happened. It's the same thing with this book called The Dam. Once again, you're showing a place, you're showing an environment, you're showing a lifestyle, you're showing a particular sort of thing, and then you're suddenly showing a change in it. You're suddenly showing a switch in it. And through that switch, through that one event, you are then talking about something much larger, about what could happen, like why are oil spills bad? You know, what happens to animals? What happens to our sea creatures when oil spills happen? Who's responsible for oil spills, you know? Because this idea of who is responsible is once again something, also tell me if I'm going at warp speed and you need me to slow down. Because this idea of who is responsible is something that kids often ask themselves. And there is guilt associated with it. We're currently working on a book actually with APU itself on climate change, where we've been reaching out to a lot of children. We've also reached out to Timira's kids at Akshara. And we're reaching out to a lot of children to understand what they think of climate change. Why do they love trees? What do they think they can do to change climate change? And we've had 2 massive revelations when we've had this conversation with children. One is that there is massive guilt associated with climate change, and this guilt is something they've taken upon themselves. I'm so sorry, it is my fault. I will be better. But what our literature and what our books need to do is instead show them that it's not your fault. You are inheriting this horrible place that we are leaving you. And the reason we're leaving you with this place is for all of these XYZ reasons, right? And so our books need to do that. A lot of times what books end up doing is, oh, you know, you can save the earth if you just stop using as much light. Like if you change your light bulb to this, if you use plastic bags, and all of that is great. But what it's doing is it's giving a one-sided view of the environment or of nature or of climate change, right? It's not presenting the whole picture. It's not saying that, yes, of course, every little bit counts. Every little thing that you do matters. It's giving them hope that they can change things. And that hope is essential. But what it's not doing is it's also not telling them that, listen, there are people who are accountable. Hold people accountable. Which is why Greta is such a powerful just like Icon, why Ridhima Pandey is so powerful, why all of these young kids are so powerful in what they're trying to do is because they realize that they can make a change. There is that hope, but they also realize that that accountability rests elsewhere, right? And if our books are able to do that, able to show that, then we have something that is, then we have at least some, it's been a successful attempt at something, which is why Bijal's book works so well, because Bijal understands agency and accountability, and she's able to bring that into her books. So when you're creating your writing, think of agency and think of accountability. A lot of times we're trying to just say, okay, you know what, I want to talk about this subject. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a conversation between an adult and a child, and the child is asking questions, the adult is sort of answering the questions, and we're going to kind of just like go through the whole narrative in that sense. But then where is the agency of your child? If all they're doing is receiving information, how are they acting on this information, right? And if the adult is just giving them information, like, is the adult also feeling accountable in some ways? That, okay, I haven't, like, I'm a part of the problem, or it's, oh, there is a problem, let's talk about it. The problem lies elsewhere. It's not within us. It's not in this conversation we're having, you know? So I think these are really important questions to ask yourself. I'm going to pause, because I've been talking for a really long time, and ask if people have questions before I quickly jump into fiction and pitching. Raghavendra.
Meet, you said you got the 2 points, and you said one is the massive guilt in the student that
yes,
it's their fault. And what was the second point?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I did forget to mention the second point. The second point was that most kids viewed nature in a very transactional manner. I love trees because trees give me wood to build my house. I love animals because animals give me leather and milk. I love the earth because there is no other place in the universe where I can live, only earth. And so a lot of urban kids, even a lot of like in tier 2, tier 3 cities, your interaction with nature, while it does exist, your interaction with nature has now become very transactional, right? And how do you use that idea of, okay, but a child's interaction with nature shouldn't be transactional? How do you put that into your books to show a more organic relationship, maybe, to show a more beautiful relationship, maybe? I know somebody else has a pitch that they've submitted, which is basically just about admiring the world, which is basically just about like stepping out and saying, hello, my beautiful earth. And that's such a great way of doing it. You're not loving something for its transactionality. You're loving something because it is beautiful. And just these base emotions of like, of love, of hating something, of beauty, of admiration are powerful emotions to play with. And I think the best books are able to tap into those very powerful emotions to then make an impact. The one and only Ivan is able to do that. Year of the Weeds is able to do that. There's this really nice book called Twitch, which if anyone's working on middle grade fiction, then I highly recommend Twitch to you. Actually, read anything by M.G. Leonard. She's written Twitch, and she also has this fantastic book called Beetle Boy. It's a series. It's a really funny story about Beetle Boy. I had gone on a nature walk a couple of weeks ago in JKVK campus in Bangalore. And it was basically about looking at smaller organisms around nature. And I'd already read Beetle Boy at that point, and I thought it was a great book. You know, it was really nice. I enjoyed it. I wasn't blown away by it. But then when I went on this nature walk and I saw beetles, and I saw them in those vibrant colors, and I saw them with their like exoskeletons, those metallic exoskeletons, I saw the houses that they build. Suddenly, this book was no longer just an okay book. This book was just, oh my God, what has this author done with nature? And I also had this admiration for the beetles itself, because I'm just like, oh my God, maybe this beetle actually is going to save the world. Maybe M.G. Leonard was right, and this is the beetle that's going to change everything, right? I have taken what I had read and what I have seen, and I've been able to actually make that connection as an adult, and realize the potential of both writing, but as well as like the potential in nature. And the book in no ways was didactic. The book in no ways taught me anything about anything. It was just pure, sheer entertainment. But in that, it's built in me a fascination for beetles, which I have now gone ahead and like explored in the world, right? And so that idea of transactionality is something that we need to sort of like chink away at, dismantle in our readers. Nature is not transactional. Our association with the environment is not transactional. And so how do our books also show that relationship in a not transactional manner? Any other questions before I jump into something else? Safi says, give a list of these books. Yes, Megha will compile all of them. We've literally like our stacks. We'll just take pictures of our stacks and send them to Megha. Okay, so that's nonfiction, right? And nonfiction, and as we've realized, we can do it in many different ways. And there's many different sort of formats of looking at nonfiction. I will say this, there's a lot of hesitation around picture books, because there's this idea that, oh, but you know, a picture book might be a bit too simplistic for my idea. And that's something you need to dismantle. What is my idea and what is the best way to present my idea? Sometimes even the most complex ideas can work as picture books if handled correctly, right? And sometimes the most simplest ideas can also work as like young adult books. It's about how you're treating your story. So if you get feedback, like I know that in the pitches that we have received in a bunch of places where people have sent longer stories, the feedback has been, you know, maybe you want to consider a picture book. And that's because maybe there is, at the core of it, there's an idea that can be presented so simply to a young reader that it will make a difference to them as a reader. That this is something that they should be learning at that age, at that sort of level, right? And so be open to that idea of, okay, maybe my idea that I think will work really well as a young adult book might also actually work as a picture book, because it's introducing something to my reader at the right age group, at the right level.
Yeah,
right?
also, I think, you know, some of the pictures where we suggested that, where we discussed, was also where visuals can come in so beautifully into your narrative. Yes. You know,
Okay.
and I remember I had asked about visuals earlier. So,
yeah. Since we're talking about visuals, let us talk about gush over something I love very much, which is wordless books. Wordless books are a thing of beauty. Because what a wordless book is doing is not forcing vocabulary on a child. What it's doing is improving visual literacy. So one of the things that we've been doing at Pratham Books recently is we've been visiting a lot of libraries around the country to meet kids, to understand how kids are reading. And the sad fact is that because of the pandemic and even just because of our schooling system, a lot of kids at 4th grade levels are reading at 1st grade levels. We met a lot of children who were 7th graders who were struggling with the most simple sentences of "it rained today," right? So how do you work with your reader who is struggling with language? Because our education system is inadequate, let's be very honest. All of us do live in an urban bubble where we do have access to great education, where we're surrounded by kids who have access to great education. But that's not the case for a majority of the children in this country. They don't have access to that great education. They are struggling to read at a 4th grader level as 4th graders. And that's why wordless picture books come in. What wordless picture books let you do is present a story, and you can still be the author. Like, you can still be the author and the creator of this whole world, but you can work in tandem with an illustrator and let the illustrator use their language. Your language doesn't need to be there for your story to be told. Is it the responsibility of a children's book to build vocabulary? We will answer that in just a second. So, so if you were to look at, let me talk to you about Rajiv Iyer, who's just a magician and a genius, and his picture book, Duga. So Duga is the story actually of his own dog, Durga, whom they rescued, who had lost a leg, right? And Duga basically just tells a story of this cheerful, bubbly, amazing dog called Duga, who's just going about life until something happens and Duga loses a leg. And then it's a story of how Duga rebuilds his life. And it's told from the perspective of the dog itself, from Duga's perspective itself, of what happens. There is not a single word in this book, and yet at the end of it, you will find yourself weeping. You will understand exactly how Duga is feeling. You will understand exactly how the people who rescued him are feeling. You will know what Duga likes and dislikes. You will understand Duga's personality completely. Because the story is so strong, and that story is translated so well into the illustration, that you don't need any words to convey it. There's another dog book called Stormy, which does the same thing extremely well, which is about a dog and a human. And this dog being very afraid and what the human's able to do to sort of get the dog to open up, get out of its shell, and just like come with her, right? And so what a book like this lets a child do is tell the story in their own words. It empowers kids. Is it the responsibility of a children's book to build vocabulary? Not necessarily. But it is a responsibility in some ways of a children's book to encourage curiosity, to sort of like ignite imaginations, right? And if a child is able to also use the vocabulary they have to do that, then that's very empowering for a reader. That they're just like, okay, I was able to think of this all by myself. That's encouraging reading, and that's encouraging readers to then further read the middle grade book you'll eventually end up writing, right? And that's kind of what a children's book does end up doing. A picture book at least does end up doing for a child, for a reader. There are many ways of doing fiction. We'll quickly jump into that because Megha have 5 minutes, right? Before people have to go.
I mean, we are at 12:55.
Yeah.
Maybe, are you all okay if we maybe extend, Smith, are you also okay if we extend by maybe 10-15 minutes? Is
I'm fine.
everyone
I love
okay?
doing this. So
I know we're very close to lunch hour. I don't want to eat into too much of your day here.
Yeah.
About 10, I just have like 2 minutes worth of announcements at the end. And yes,
cool.
That's all. So
cool. So we'll quickly jump into fiction, and then I will talk to you about just like how to pitch something, and then we'll take a bunch of questions that had been asked at the beginning. Many ways of doing fiction. Fiction can be through picture books. You can just have like Duga in some ways is fictionalized in a little bit, right? Or just you know, you've all read picture books that have fiction. So you can do fiction, environmental writing through picture books, through fiction. You can do it through adventure stories. You can do it through nature stories. You can take a particular fact in nature and then you can just sort of let it play out. So I'll talk to you about one book called Help My Eye Wants to Eat Me. Okay. It's a book about a child who thinks his mother is going to eat him because he watched a nature documentary. And in the nature documentary, bears eat bear cubs. And suddenly he's just like, okay, nature is twisted. If bears can eat bear cubs, mummies can eat children. And my mummy is unwell, just like the bear is unwell. So if the bear ate the bear cub, I would probably get eaten by my mom as well. The book is called Help My Eye Wants to Eat Me. It's written by Bijal again, and little biased, like I edited it. So, but I think it's genuinely a great book. Is what it's called. And so in that particular book, what you've done is you've created a little boy who loves nature, right? And you have a lot of children who already love nature. And so a child feels seen in that. And then you've taken a fact in nature. And this is true. A lot of animals do eat their young ones. Cats eat their young ones. And every single time Bija brings this fact in a session, kids are horrified. Kids are just like, it is okay for bears to eat their young ones. How can a cat eat their young one? If a cat can eat their young one, surely my mother can eat me. You know, that's kind of where the trajectory goes. But the idea is that at the end of the day, the core idea is so much fun. But you're also presenting nature in a really sort of like fun setting. And so that's something for you to think about. Don't overload your narratives with every single fact about nature because you've lost your reader. Why writing? Yeah, I'll give you why writing as well. Don't overload your books with facts. Pick a few strands and then see how you can incorporate them into your book. So let's talk about Twitch, right? Twitch is about a young boy who loves birds. So you learn a lot about birds through this young boy who already knows a lot about birds. But at the core of Twitch, he's what MG Leonard has managed to do with this. It's a thriller basically. It's a mystery. There's a plot where somebody's trying to steal something, and these guys are trying to like stop people from stealing something. And there's this like huge adventure and a mystery and a thriller, all of that tied into it. But they use their knowledge of birding to catch a kidnapper, right? So you've applied something from nature into a real life scenario, and that's how you've taught people about nature. You've taught people about like a particular phenomenon that exists, that happens, but without really overloading the reader with a lot of information, because any clever reader will pick this up and will go and find nonfiction about it. We'll go and read up about it. The internet is a beautiful place. It has everything. So don't do the job of the internet for the reader. You are the storyteller. So, focus on being the storyteller for your reader. And then it is the reader's responsibility or the parent's responsibility, or not even responsibility, but it is their curiosity that will get them to the information at the end of the day. It's the same with another, this is a middle grade to YA-ish book called Hoot. Hoot is fantastic about conservation. There's these little owls that are endangered owls that are sort of under threat in this particular book. And it's about how this boy sort of helps thwart that. Saves the forest, helps these animals, helps habitats. It does that. But it does that once again through the plot of a thriller, right? Mythology with natural elements in it. If you're listening to every single one of these book descriptions that I'm giving you, what Timira said about Year of the Weeds, nowhere are we telling you what the natural element of the story is. It's about the story itself. What you've done is you've used nature as like a surrogate or whatever, or like you've used nature as a prop to drive your story forward. Can I show the last one? This one, Torchbearers. It's called The Torchbearers. Reminds me of Deepak Dalal's Vikramaditya series. Yes, I have had the pleasure of working with Deepak, and what Deepak does and where Deepak Dalal's writing shines is when he's talking about nature. Like Deepak loves nature. He's not a naturalist. He's not a conservationist. He's a stock market person. He's like an engineer. He writes about nature because he truly loves nature. And what he likes doing is he likes describing nature, describing animals, describing locales. He has his book called Lakshadweep Adventures, where he's talking about undersea life. The way he writes about the ocean and about turtles is gorgeous. But what Deepak does is he builds his plots around his habitats, around his environment, around nature, around what happens. So nowhere does nature interact with the plot itself in the way it does in Twitch, let's say, where they're actually using this idea of, it's called murmuration, like birds murmurate. So they've used murmuration to sort of like hatch a plot. But what Deepak does is Deepak is sort of letting something play out in nature. And that's another great way of doing it. That's what Ranjit Lal does in that tiger book. Megha, what was the tiger book called? I've forgotten.
Tigers of Tabu Valley.
Yes. Right. It's set in a certain place. You're sort of using that setting, and then you're letting a very different story play out in that setting. And it has no interaction with the setting whatsoever. But that still does help readers connect with nature in a lot of ways. And to the person asking for YA examples, Deepak Dalal's book, the Vikramaditya series, are actually all YA. So that is something that you can read. Fair warning, Deepak does ramble a little bit, so you have to have a little bit of patience as a reader, but that's fine. It works for a lot of readers. It doesn't work for a lot of readers. But his writing is a thing of beauty when he's specifically talking about nature and he's talking about wildlife, because he does it so well. It is now 1:00, so we will stop talking about genre format, the ways you can let your stories play out. But just remember all of these things, yeah. And I quickly want to talk about just like, how do you choose what to write about? Like as creators, because I'm sure you have lots of different ideas and you're just like, oh, I want to write about everything. There's also great comic book related nature. There's so many good comic books related to nature. Let's not even get into that. There's like so much. But I got to work on naturalist study, and let me just tell you, it is such fun working on graphic novels and comic books, and that's a great way of sort of exploring narratives as well. Because once again, it works with comic books, let you work with adults and illustrations, because a lot of these, otherwise like fiction, you can't always use illustrations to sort of prove your point. But with comic books, you can do that. With graphic novels, you can do that. You can use art for adults and sort of create something beautiful. How do you pick what to write about? And this ties into this idea of what kind of research should I be doing? Where are my sources? And what I would say is that as a creator, it is great to push yourself, to sort of push your own boundaries as a creator, to say, okay, I want to try something new, but you also have got to play to your strengths. If you are somebody who's excellent at research, who has connections, who has contacts, who knows how to research, who knows how to present research, then absolutely go for it, work on nonfiction. But if you're somebody who does better as a storyteller, then pick a form that plays on your strengths as a storyteller, even if it is non-fiction. Do you want to, instead of presenting non-fiction as non-fiction, the way Megha does, for example, right? Like Megha has this knack of turning like heavy information into narrative, and she does that really well, right? But if you're somebody who's unable to sort of do that, then maybe you want to maybe go like a Subhadra Sen Gupta route. What Subhadra Sen Gupta does really well, if you read something like A Bag Full of History, she understands historical settings. And so she creates fictionalized stories in historical settings, and then we'll just put a note at the end about history.
Yeah.
Because she's just like, yeah, Megha.
There's just one little input that I have for the writers of non-fiction.
Yeah.
This is, if you think that you want to tell a story, but you're not one to build on imagination, it's absolutely all right. Some of us tend to not have that skill. Then non-fiction is not just, history or whatever. You can write biographies, you can write real life stories of people very much in the storytelling format.
Yeah, which is what Deepak Dalal does.
Correct. And also sometimes, it can just be like in Deepak's, he's taken natural setting and sort of put in fictional elements. Your entire story can be non-fiction, but told as a story. If it is a incident, maybe from a life of a person, like the Janaki Ammal books, that, the shorter biographies.
Yeah.
And also picture book 2Y, there is many sort of subsets in the middle. So that's also something that, in terms of format and genre, Smith, maybe for just to keep in mind. Yeah. Sorry about interrupting you.
No, that makes perfect sense. Like, it is something for you to think about. So I think it is worthwhile for you to sit and understand what your own skill as a writer is, right?
I have a question there.
Yes.
This is Ramya.
Yeah, hi.
So specifically when if it's a retelling of existing tales from epics or anywhere, how much of creative liberties is the author allowed?
Oh, sky's the limit, if you ask me, because at the end of the day, you're very clear that this is a retelling, right? Like, you're making it very clear that this is your retelling of something. So the sky is the limit as long as you're not removing all familiarity from the tale, because then it's no longer a retelling. So what you've got to be able to do is decide which part of this is important in the identification that this is a retelling, right? So that the reader immediately knows, oh yeah, this is Cinderella. It has particular tropes, but then you've stripped it off of everything else and you've tried to do something new with it. So you can go as crazy as you want with the retelling, as long as one, it's deliberate. Like, you know what you're doing. Okay. And that also goes for this idea of an open ending. Like, if you're deliberately saying, okay, I want something to be open-ended, you have to have good reason for it. It can't be, oh, I can't think of anything else, I'm just going to leave it open-ended, right? That immediately translates for a reader, where they're just like, oh, okay, this is very confused.
Yeah.
So if you're changing a particular element in your retelling, there has to be very good reason why you're doing it. So ask yourself that, what is my reason I'm changing this? What is the goal of changing something like this? How does it impact my larger story?
So in my case, I think the issue that I'm kind of facing is that the stories that are available are very sparse. It's there, but it's just like, okay, this happened and then this happened around this particular tree. That's it. So to actually flesh that out into a full-fledged story, I will have to add in some elements of my own imagination. And my concern there is, will I be kind of doing injustice to the original story by doing that?
No, not when you are very, very clear in communicating what it is that you're trying to do. So don't try to do this and then pass it off as a nonfiction book, right? Because then that is muddled up. But if you're saying, this is a fictionalized retelling of a particular event, like I'm thinking of The Crown, right? Like, I don't know if we've all watched The Crown, but The Crown has fictionalized a whole bunch of stuff. I'm very into it. I will watch it. I don't care if it's wrong. But here's the thing, it is fictionalized and it's perfectly okay as long as you're clearly communicating that, okay, this is a fictionalized retelling of something. Then you pad it up, then you make it interesting. Megha.
Sorry, no. I think, Ramya, you're talking about your collection of trees in tribal lore, right?
Yes, yes.
But in Ramya's case, Smith, I think she has a story, but also which is part of a larger non-fiction narrative. So we do have fact plus fiction, provided your narrative is not overpowered by that, like center of the narrative is not the retelling. The retelling can be part, like even in my, the nonfiction that I write, sometimes I have other elements coming in, fictionalized can be one of those, not in my books, but I've seen that also happens. Provided you're very clear that mine is a non-fiction book, and this is part of the larger narrative. If you are peddling it as fiction, then the whole arc has to change.
So what I'm saying works both ways. Like it's also about, if it's non-fiction and if you're peddling it as fiction, then that's an issue. You need to be very clear, which is where the deliberation comes in, right? About
so
what
is there
it.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, is there a?
No,
we can, you know what we can do, Ramya? We can go into a bit more in depth about this particular thing tomorrow.
Yes.
That because this is very specific to your writing, and I'll also refresh my memory because I have read 65 entries and I'm a little muddled with who said what right now.
We can do that.
Yes, let's definitely do that.
Thank you.
Okay. So much more to cover, so little time. So very quickly then, now that we've gone over all of this, what are some of the things that you should think about when you're thinking about your pitch? And this is something you can think about tomorrow as well, when you're pitching it to us and then when you finally pitch it to publishers, right? What are some of the things that you should definitely think about? One is, like I said, your pitch itself, that elevator pitch. So sit with your books tonight and really think about what is the one thing that my book is about. You know, what is at the core of my book? What is that focal point in my book? And I think that is really, really important, because once you have that clarity, your book will also be better. It won't be trying to do way too many things in one narrative. And if it's nonfiction, then your focal point is basically like, even within nonfiction, especially when you write nonfiction for kids, right? There has to be a thread through it. There has to be that central sort of like, okay, let's take Megha's book, for example, right? She is talking about history, but she's very specifically talking about environmental history. So let's say if there's some subsidiary story, which is just an interesting fact in history that happened at the same time that this environmental movement was happening, how relevant is it to my movement right now? How relevant is it to what I'm trying to do in this particular book? Because especially when you're writing nonfiction, there will be so much research you will gather. Like there will be a lot of research and you'll be so tempted to put it all in as a, oh, you know, I put a little did you know box. I'll put a little like note at the end. I'll do this. What ends up happening then is that you have put in so many facts in your book that we only have that much of an attention span. We're only going to take away that much information. And so eventually you end up with just a very muddled sort of chapter of trying to do way too many things and not sort of focusing on that central thread that you have for your nonfiction as well.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about that. So sit with your stories. What is the story you're trying to tell? What is its focal point? Sometimes your focal point will be defined by your character. Sometimes it's defined by the environment. Sometimes it's defined by an event. It could be any of these things. So find that out for yourself, what that is, because that's really important to your pitch. So your pitch has got to have that. It's also really nice when it comes to nonfiction, if you have some kind of a chapter breakdown already. It'll change as you research, as you write more, you'll realize that, okay, I need to restructure my book. I need to sort of change how I'm paginating my book, and that will change. But at the very get-go, it is really good for you to have that framework ready of, okay, this is largely what I would like to cover in my book. With Megha's book, she had a very clear idea of, okay, I'd like to start with environment, with the partition, and I'd like to end with climate change, because that's where we are right now, right? And then you kind of trace it chronologically. And that's a structure. That's a chapterization she already has in her head approaching the book. So then you're tailoring your research according to that. You're reaching out to experts according to that. So there's some streamlining happening. And with fiction, it's really, really, really nice if as a creator, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's it. You don't have to have like the little events. You don't need to know, okay, this happens and this happens, this happens. But largely, what is my beginning? What is my middle? What is my end? Later, when you work with your editor, you might realize that your editor is just like, you know what, let's start with this middle. And then we'll go back in time to the beginning. And then we'll go forward in time again. That is a structural idea that will work, that will change. But just when you're presenting, when you're pitching, have that beginning, middle, and end in your head. Because if somebody asks you, okay, but where is your story going? You know where your story is going. And that inspires confidence in your editor, in your publisher, that, okay, you as an author are in control of your narrative.
Yeah.
Right?
Question from Varsha.
Sorry. Oh, hi,
Hi.
Asha. Yes, hi.
Yeah, just had a question. So maybe for one of the books, any of the ones that are on Storyweaver that we can go back and look, can you just give us an example of what a pitch would look like for that book?
Why don't you guys, like we spoke about Duga, right? With Duga, okay, actually, okay, I do have the right book for you. So the pitch for one particular book that we worked on was basically exploring mischief in daily life. That was the idea of the book, explore mischief. Now, I want you guys to go ahead and read this book called The Theatre of Ghosts by Pankaj Saikia. It's a wordless picture book. It's on Storyweaver, read it. And it explores, it's taken this idea of, okay, we're using mischief and it's shown you so many other things through it. So why don't you guys go and do that? Does that help, Asha? Yeah? Cool.
What about the Myna Ate the Sun? Did the author come to you? Was it a commissioned book?
It was a commissioned book. So with Pratham Books, we work on grants. So we've been given specific sort of grants. And so Myna was basically a STEM book. We'd been told you have to create a STEM book.
So, sorry, the reason I ask is, guys, I know in this case, you all will be pitching to publishers, but it might also help the other way. For instance, the way it will be like, so in that instance, would you say, listen, I want to write, I want you to write a book on the food chain where where we explore the role of the sun, the sort of within the food chain, and then the writer writes, or was it like we want to write a book on the food chain?
It's actually, we want to write a book on a food chain. And that's how a lot of times when I also commission for Penguin and for Pratham Books, like when I'm doing, name of the book is called, so when I'm doing, when I'm commissioning, I'm not going with a very specific idea of, okay, I want you to write about a character who is like this, who does this. It's, we're thinking that we need to have a book that looks at bullying from the bully's angle, maybe. That's the pitch you go out with. And then it's the author who comes in with their ideas and their explorations. So what might happen? Okay, so for example, there's this book that I commissioned called Topi Rockets from Tumba. Okay. Topi Rockets from Tumba happened because I was working on Megha's book. And there was one particular chapter in Megha's book where there was a very interesting photograph. And I'm just like, this photograph has a story. And that stayed in my head. Now, a separate incident where an author wrote to me with a picture book idea, and she's just like, here is a picture book. I really want to publish this picture book. I read the picture book. I'm just like, you're a great writer, but this is not a great story. Would you instead be interested in writing this story for me? And I gave her the photograph that I found. Because I'm like, okay, your writing is great, but this might not be the strongest idea for you. And that might happen to you as well as when you pitch to publishing houses, where they'll say, actually you're a very good writer, but this idea has already been done. It's too niche, has not been explored too well by in your writing. Would you instead like to write a book about this?
Yeah.
And you be open to something like that. And then you say, okay, fine. How do I take something I'm interested in? Because a lot of times it depends on you as a creator. If your expertise, let's say, is in food security or something, and people are just like, okay, you've written this book, we are looking at a different book. Here is the pitch for you. You are an expert already in it. And then you sort of develop it. How do you take your research? How do you take your interest in something and turn that into a book? That is a scenario that might often happen.
Yeah.
So in your pitch, apart from the beginning, middle, end, apart from all of those things, it is very, very important for you to have a very strong writing sample. For nonfiction writers, it could be a writing sample, but it could also just be the first chapter. And for fiction, it has to be the first 3 chapters. You have to present very, very strong first 3 chapters. And you might not, and there's a good possibility, a lot of times what happens is they're just like, okay, I only have 3 chapters, so I'm going to fit everything into my 3 chapters. So they know exactly where my story is going, but you're actually doing a disservice to your writing then. Because what you're showing the editor is that I have no control over my writing now, over the way I'm unfolding something. Mika.
Sorry, no, I think some of you would have gotten worked up because we haven't gotten 3 chapters from you. And you may not have 3 chapters at this point. So I'll just get to it aram se. This is a regular pitch to a publisher when you're sending in your manuscript. Here we have already alerted the publishers in terms of what to expect from you all.
Yeah.
So don't
worry.
Get worked up. I have written that much. Huh? That's all I want.
This is just in a regular pitch, like when you're sending a pitch. Like, see, I feel like if Catherine Applegate, who wrote The One and Only Ivan, had sent me a beginning, middle, and an end. A thing about like, this is what my story is about. And if she had only sent me that first chapter with 2 lines, my name is Ivan, I am a gorilla, it is not as easy as it looks, I would have signed that book on. No questions asked. I don't need to see the other chapters because this is an author who's very much in control of her writing. So work on your first chapter, work on that hook, work on that first impression that you're making for your editor. Because that's his first impression you'll be making for your reader as well, but your editor is going to be your first reader. So how do you hook them in? How do you grip them? So it's very important to have that strong thing. Nowadays, editors, I mean, publishing houses are also looking for like, oh, you know how well connected you are, your marketing plans, etc., etc. Don't get deterred by that. There are, of course, going to be a lot of high profile people who will be submitting books, but their writing will be shitty. So it's fine. Like, you're okay. Your strength lies in your writing.
No, and absolutely, I must actually say this because, you know, guys, it's not as if, I mean, this is my own personal experience, but the books that I've written, I'm not some, you know, big shit celebrity or somebody who got like some 1,100, you know, followers on this social media channel. But the books are doing all right. Even at Tulika, I worked with Tulika for 9 years. So many debut authors, their books are doing so well. 8, 9 reprints, you know, which is not a joke. So that is one concern. But yeah, I mean, I know some of us are experienced, and I think some in this group, Smith and I were discussing, are very new to writing. So I think the expectation with the publishers has been set, right?
Yeah.
In terms of your pitch, I think what you all need to really work on is some of the synopses were very long and could have been a lot more focused on what is the idea that you want to write. I think some people got confused about synopsis also including things about why they want to be part of this workshop and so on and so forth. But yeah, just relook at all your synopsis, tally it with your writing sample, and just prune the synopsis. We're going to get into more details of that tomorrow. But that is something I think at the end of the 2 sessions today, if you all can just go back and revisit the synopsis and maybe a little bit of the beginning, because I think the publishers are only going to be reading about 250 to 300 words. They're going to be browsing because that's exactly what they do. Sometimes they don't even like read too much. They read the synopsis.
No, a lot of times the synopsis is the entry and exit point for a lot of proposals.
Which is why I'm saying, please relook at your synopsis.
Yeah.
Sharpen your synopsis.
Yeah.
And the beginning of your books, just kind of see how you want to phrase those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Shreyasi has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do the first 3 chapters have to be the first 3 chapters, or there can be any 3 chapters that are the strongest?
Depends on the kind of book that you're pitching. So with you're pitching fiction, you're pitching short fiction, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be first 3 chapters. It can be 3 interesting things. Even with non-fiction, it doesn't have to be first 3 chapters, you know. It can be 3 well-written chapters. But with fiction, ideally, you, like with long fiction, ideally, as an editor, I would want to read the first 3 chapters. And I want to know your beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Because what it lets me do is it lets me understand whether you know how to construct a story. Because if you send me 3 disparate chapters, I don't know if you know how to tie a story together. And that's very, very important.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're having the confidence that your author knows how to tie your story together. Because what often happens is that you'll get the first draft of the manuscript, and that's great. That's fine. There's issues in the manuscript, right? So then you'll go back to them and you're just like, okay, chapter 8 doesn't work. I need you to move chapter 7 to chapter 12. I need you to bring this in. So you're going to get feedback like that. You know, that's the first line of feedback you'll get, structural editing. And that's kind of what I do. I don't do line editing as much. I'm a structural editor. Yeah. So what I would do is I would tell you, okay, your story works, but this is how it should work. This is how you need to reorder it. This is the character you need to bring in. You need to remove this character. When you present your author with all of this information, they need to be able to know how to process this and how to incorporate it. Because a lot of times what happens is you'll get a writer who's excellent at writing, but does not know how to take feedback, right? Does not know, is either reluctant to take feedback or is happy to take feedback, but doesn't know how to process that feedback. And that's something, that's a skill to work on. How do you process feedback, and how do you sort of take something that you have an idea for, break it down and rebuild it? because that will keep happening especially in writing. Like writing is not a solitary process, first of all. You're constantly going to be listening to your reader, you're listening to your editor, you're listening to like other people who are reading it, and you're taking all of that information in. In nonfiction, you're going to be sending it to experts who will tell you, okay, you know what, your facts are all wrong, man. Like, change it. You're going to need to know how to incorporate all of that into your writing. Megha has a question. If we're pitching a picture book in this workshop, will the publisher, two ways of going about it. A lot of times publishers don't want sample illustrations if your story is strong enough. Yeah. It's fine. If you're pitching a book as an author illustrator, or if you're pitching a book with an illustrator in company, then it's good for you to have illustrations. There's no hard and fast rule though. It changes with every single picture book, with every single sort of scenario. But if you are pitching a book where you are author and illustrator, then yeah, it would be great for you to send in a sample illustration to say, okay, I'm illustrating the book myself, and this is my style. A lot of times what has happened when I have gotten picture books in the past that are already illustrated, I love the story, but I hate the illustrations. Like the illustrations just don't work for the book. And then I have to break somebody's heart and tell them, listen, these illustrations don't work. I know you already paid for them.
I wonder what's going to happen if you love the illustrations and hate the story.
Then you poach the illustrator for a different project on the side.
Yes.
And you gently break it down to the author saying, I'm so sorry, there's no space on our list right now for you. What else do we do?
Yeah. But yeah, I'm going to have to step in, I think, unless there's any questions, because I think Smith also has to make a move, and I'm sure all of you are also. It's been a long one. We started at 9:45.
Yeah, I'm so sorry I couldn't cover everything. But
if there's stuff that you want to cover, Smith, why don't you also just put it in? And because, you know, we of course have limited time, because all of y'all are working professionals and not everybody has time to, you know, sit through the whole day. So we're going to send you notes. Most of the things have been, I think, covered in terms of what is important.
Yeah.
But if you felt that there were some burning questions you had, which have somehow not been covered in today's sessions, please, because this is also the first time Shashwat and I have kind of designed this thing. If there are questions that you'd want answers for, which haven't been, please do either email us or you put it into the WhatsApp group. I'm going to be sending you notes from today's session, and Smith and Timira are going to include anything which, you know, struck them retrospectively into those notes. You're going to have a list of all the books that were spoken about, plus some more which weren't, because we didn't have enough time. Yeah, but don't worry about it. Also, I understand that, you know, it can get a little anxiety arousing, because we have a critical review of the writing tomorrow, and then on first we're actually going straight to the publishers. So obviously it's very nerve-wracking. I know. I mean, I've been there, where, you know, you have professionals reading your work and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get so canned at the end of this. But let's not work from that space. You know,
I think you should just rephrase critical writing to it's constructive, friendly feedback on writing.
Yeah, like you know, we're working with a university. Critical review of writings is what works very well in their
the pedagogy.
But yes, so tomorrow, Smith, and to everyone else, I'm going to wrap up by saying that we've seen all of the writing, so we do understand where you're coming from, what your possible strengths are, and we might in a few cases also have some recommendations of books which you might want to check out, you know, given your specific sample. All of that for tomorrow, because I think we need some more time with y'all. What we've done is we've split you all into 3 batches, and we're going to be taking batches of 7, 6, 6, because there are 19 of us, and each batch will have half an hour. But your writings are going to be put up on screen, and Smith and I are going to sort of share our specific feedback on the writing and what you could probably think of doing for the open pitch. But before that, in the morning, we have Zai Whitaker and Ranjit Lal with us, as I said. And of course, I'll have a brief interaction with them, but the point of the whole exercise is for you all to ask them. They've been writing on nature for children since donkey's years, late 1990s, 2000s, early 2000s. So they've really seen the industry grow, this form of writing grow in children's publishing within India. So if you have any sort of fears about, you know, writing and feedback and putting stories to publishers, please feel free to ask those questions tomorrow. And after that, how we've structured this is we'll have them from 10 to about 10:45. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll go into our half an hour slots with all of your manuscripts, all of your synopses and writing samples. If there are any pointed questions you have about your own writing, it might be useful to just come with those questions prepared, because we have our sort of feedback on your writing ready. But if you have certain pointed concerns or questions, it might be very useful to come prepared with that tomorrow. And if you want to relook at some portions of your submissions in light of what was discussed today, or in light of the write-up, I'd suggest that, if you can take out some time and look at sort of rephrasing that. There is a
I think in general, no, that was just me giving little tip.
Yeah. You don't have to prepare any presentation or anything. This is exactly when we asked you for your submissions. This is exactly knowing what publishers would want from you. I mean, at this stage, we wanted a synopsis and we wanted a writing sample. So there's no need to prepare a sort of detailed, I don't think anybody will have the time to go through a presentation. We will exactly be using a Word doc. All of you were emailed a Word doc with a certain feedback in green, right? So it's going to literally be just that. We're going to have your synopsis and we're going to have your write-up, and the publisher is going to see what is presented to them on screen right away. Mind you, this is how all publishers, we usually don't know the writers we're dealing with, barring a few cases where the writer has already been published widely and a manuscript from him or her has come to our desk. We don't know you all. So we get the manuscript literally like that. We know your idea and we've read a little bit of your writing. Very often, I know this happened at Tulika, we love the idea, don't like the writing. So we'd think of, can you try rewriting your, idea like this? Or, we realize that this is working very well as a picture book, even though it's been submitted as a chapter book, because there is so much of scope to build on visuals. So just be open to that feedback, because Smith and I have actually done that little bit of homework for you already. So by the time you go to the publishers, and also we're going to be sending you to publishers who might be interested in the sort of books that you have sent. So it's not like everybody is going to go to everyone. We've sort of curated your writings to send you to publishers who might be interested in the kind of work that you have submitted. But I think that's just to give you a sense of easing your anxiety a bit about your writing, going to strange people who probably read a gazillion books, and how they just, that should not be a fear at all. Everybody knows where we are at. And our work is to just help you along on the journey and not make it more difficult or make it more anxiety arousing, because writing itself is, can be, okay.
Mika has a question.
Yeah, Sefi is saying, Sefi, if that mail hasn't been sent to you, we will send it right away. Shashwat, if Shashwat's around, Sefi says she's not got the feedback mail, Shashwat. So maybe we can send that to her. And if we have worked on the writing based, can we share it today? Saurav, yes, if you want to relook at your writing sample based on the discussions today, yes, please bring along, please by early morning tomorrow around 8, if you can email it. So when we sit down with Smith, we'll have it ready to share with her. Yeah. But we'll already have your old sample as well, so we'll know how it's changed.
Yeah. Also, I think it makes sense that what you said, Mika, about everyone's synopsis was kind of long. So please do work on that, on narrowing it down and on finding that focus for your synopsis. What is your book really about?
Yeah. Also, tomorrow we'll be very tight on time, because I don't know whether any of you, apart from Smith, are also Bangalore based. I know Shashwat is, but there is a big festival happening this weekend, literature festival in Bangalore, and pretty much the whole publishing industry is there. So we'll have to end the session on time so that Smith can make her way to that on time. So we'd have to be really quick. If you still have concerns around your manuscripts, we are going to again take it over email separately. And of course, I'm still there. I'm going to be around and happy to answer any questions you have. 2 participants have raised. Varsha and Maria, yeah, I think you had questions.
Yeah, just two quick questions. One is it okay that we don't share a revised one for tomorrow just from a
That's
time?
fine.
Okay. And
Just work on your synopsis, Varsha, if you have written a very long one. Yeah.
Okay, sure. And my other question was eventually the final thing. Are we just doing the 300 words because you had said somewhere that that's what the publisher is going to read? Is that what we're eventually producing, or 3 chapters?
No, I think at this point, the publisher, because they are only here they've given us time slots. Again, with the publishers, you all will have in very small batches of 4 or 5 a sit down with the publisher. So they might want to so your synopsis is really key here. They need to be invested in your idea and then read a little bit of your writing to know that you can write, So work on your synopsis. I'm saying this again and again. Make it really tight and sharpen it, and look at